sent flowers to a, quote, dead ex. I am an 18-year-old guy, and I had an ex who was an 18-year-old girl who I haven't talked to in months. Fast forward to last week, I was talking to a group of friends and her name came up in conversation from a friend of a friend. This friend thought that her and I were still together, and when I explained that we weren't, we continued the conversation about it, and it got me thinking how she's been. Mind you, she went ghost and really made me hurt, but because I'm a very apologetic person, I didn't let it bother me. After the conversation though, I thought I'd reach out and just see how she's doing. So I text her friend, because she's got me blocked, just to see how she's doing. And her friend was all cool about it and the whole thing seemed fine. Until my ex texted my friend, acting like her sister, saying she had died. Little did she know, I remember when she pulled the same stunt with their ex before me. So, the revenge. Me and a group of friends made the 51-minute drive to her house to pay our respects. What we did was we went to a gas station and bought all of their flowers, put them in a basket, and put a card in it marked with our deepest condolences. The card was filled with some of the finest glitter we could find at the dollar store, and off we went to deliver everything. When we get to her house, I told my friends to stay back while I went up and knocked on the door. I set the flowers down on the porch and I walked away. As I'm walking away, however, her dad answered the door and went, "Can I help you?" To which I replied, "I'm sorry for your loss." Her name meant so much to me and it's sad to see her go. In confusion, her dad responded, "She's not dead." As me and the boys leave, her and her friends show up in her car. Then she looks at me and my friends and says, "What are you doing here?" "Well, I thought you died," I replied. Her dad was furious and essentially took all of her freedoms away until summer and actually gave me and my friends each $20 for the inconvenience and gas money. Okay, honestly, who does that? Who jokes about their own death like that? Unless you're 12 and you just have no common sense. But ghosting is one thing. Joking about your own death or faking your own death is so dumb. Also, it's so obvious that you're not dead. It's not that hard for someone to work out, oh, are you dead or alive? You don't even have to go to their house. Just go on the internet. It really can't be that hard to know. Also, word of mouth. Imagine being her dad. He's probably just what are you doing? He's probably sick of her doing this sort of stuff. Probably knows that she's done it before. And that's the reason why he's actually furious and is like, you know what, guys, thanks for telling me because this is ridiculous. I'm going to give you all some money because of the inconvenience. And she's not doing anything this summer. It's actually insane. The dad's probably a nice guy. The daughter, Jesus, horrible. Abusive mum had me disowned by entire family and banned from grandfather's funeral. This woman is insane. She has her entire side of the family wrapped around her finger, despite her being completely unhinged and psychopathic. She abused me and my sibling our entire lives, but she got less physical as she aged, and I thought that she'd fixed herself. Turns out, she just got sneaky. She's always telling lies that make herself out to be some victim, and over recent years, she's decided that I'm the one she wants to portray as her abuser since I became vocal about her abuse of me. I cut contact with her a year ago when I found out she was drip feeding my family lies about me. Nasty stuff like she was raising my children because I'd abandoned them. She lived on my street, so she just saw them for a few minutes every other day. She'd been telling the family that I had terrible mental illness and not to bother me, explaining why most of them had barely returned my calls or messages in months. When I told them about my mother's lies, they looked at me like I was having an episode, and no one supported me. My grandfather died a week ago. He was my absolute world, and I'm devastated. Then, a few days ago, I get a call from my mother telling me that I've been disowned and I'm banned from attending the funeral. Her story as to why did not make sense whatsoever, and she flitted between telling me my grandmother must have said I'm disowned because she's mentally ailing, and mentioning that I'd said that my late son was not allowed to be mentioned in the funeral service. This absolutely did not happen. I never said this, to be clear. All of my family have blocked me. They're refusing to answer voicemails, calls, texts, even the door to me. None of them even bothered to contact me to ask what happened, and none of them will hear my side. They just took her at her word that I'm this monster after probably years of groundwork was laid by my mother. I've got no clue what she said or done, but I've done nothing to warrant this. Zero drama, zero negative words crossed. I sent flowers, sympathy cards, called, and gave condolences to everyone just before this kicked off, and everyone was kind and receptive. Unfortunately, I know that she's likely made up some terrible lie, hurting my bereaved elderly grandmother at the time of a most devastating loss, as well as the rest of my family, by stirring up drama in my name that I'm completely innocent of. She's robbed me of my ability to say my last goodbye to my grandfather. She's robbed me of the rest of my family. She has them all believing that I'm some monster. And the worst part is, I don't even know what she's accusing me of, because it was clearly so bad that they've all got me blocked on everything. They're refusing to return my calls and messages, even when I've explained that I've got no idea what is going on. Her last control over me was to devastate my grandmother in my name, ruin my reputation, and break my heart by causing me to be disowned and banned from the funeral. I'm at a literal snapping point now. She's gone too far. Smashing her windows and flooding the house with a hose pipe for the 5 hours she'll be at the funeral isn't enough. Help me out here. What can I do to make this thing suffer without landing myself in prison? Heck, I have a clean record and I'd probably get off without prison time for most crimes at this point. So I'm open to suggestions. I beg of you, this woman needs comeuppance. Okay, so there we go. That is it for the first post. Now, immediately, guys, I want you to get in the comments down below and let me know what you think in regards to the funeral. Should OP go? We're going to get a funeral update in just a second regarding what happened there. But before we get into that, drop your comments down below. What do you think OP should do? I mean, they've been disowned. I don't know if legally or whatever. They've been banned from the funeral. I'm not entirely sure how. I guess the grandma, right? OP's grandma has now gone along with her mum and said that she's banned. Just crazy, the manipulation that your mum OP has on the entire family. It's absolutely unbelievable. But as I said in the intro, there's a funeral update to come and then another further update. So without further ado, let's get into the first update. I mean, just quickly, it's worth me mentioning, I think you have to go to the funeral. We'll see what happens. But if you don't go to the funeral, it's an absolute disgrace. It's not what your grandfather would have wanted, even though you're banned. Anyway, enough waffle. Let's see what happened. Okay then, so here we are, the funeral updates. I went with my friend on copious amounts of anxiety meds. We were quickly seated and the service was lovely. Afterwards, I just walked past the family straight to the car with my head held high. One relative, my granddad's daughter-in-law, his son from a previous marriage's wife, sent me a kind message almost immediately after, saying she saw me and hoped I was alright. She said she'd have spoken to me to check in on me if she'd see me afterwards, but obviously I didn't hang around. We had a chat. It's nice to know there's one person, even if it's a distant relative, that isn't a flying monkey. I'm so proud that I fought through my anxiety and went. My alarm this morning said, "Do it for Granddad." Oh my gosh. I honestly don't know if I'd have had the courage to go without all of your words and encouragement, so thank you so much. Because of you all, I didn't let her win. I mean, that is great to hear, and I'm going to be honest, like looking through the comments on the original post and seeing how many comments OP replied to is actually insane. And you might think that sometimes people say, "Oh, thanks Reddit for the tips and advice," and they're just like, you know, they read a few comments and that's sort of that. They end up making their own mind up, if you want to be cynical like me. But I mean, I'm just scrolling and scrolling and scrolling through the comments that OP has replied to on their profile. And it's crazy the influence that Reddit must have had. So, you know what? Fair play to Redditors. I probably don't say it enough, but, you know, it's a strange old community, but it's very tight-knit. And sometimes when they see wrong, or when they know that something must be changed and must be done, and they really do give great advice. One tip, actually, if you ever got a question in life and you want to use the internet to try and find some sort of help, type in your question or type in the topic and then put the word Reddit afterwards, and that will bring up answers from Reddit, and they're almost always so much better than answers that are from generic articles or just from the internet in general. That's what I always do, and I could not recommend it enough, because you get real answers and real help from real people, just like this. However, don't worry guys, there is actually one more update to come. It's the final update for now, I suppose, although this was posted just a couple of weeks ago. But let's get into it, the final update of this story. But the final update is that my aunt sent me weird messages after the funeral, still refusing to tell me what was said or what I'd done. It was confusing because she went between anger and telling me she'd hug me so tight the next time she saw me. She said she needed space, so we left that interaction on what seemed like a positive note. Oh, and it was wild that she said she didn't see me at the funeral, and if I'd have seen you, I'd have hugged you and brought you to the front row with us. And when I said I was sitting at the back, devastated, watching my family at the front row, unable to be there, supporting my sobbing grandmother, my aunt replied, "Oh yes, that was me. I actually asked your mother to tell you to stay away from us all." It seemed very bipolar. I asked her if there was any reason why no one would tell me directly what I was being accused of, and she didn't answer. She just said that she needed time. Right, okay. Now, I'd already decided I'd be cutting contact after this. The hurt was too much, but I'd hoped she'd eventually clarify the situation to me with time for my own closure. A couple of days after her last message to me, my aunt messaged my ex-husband trying to deliver a birthday gift for my son to his house personally instead of to mine. He politely replied that he didn't want to get involved, having had no contact with my family in years, and to either deal with me or send any gifts in the post. She replied with quite a nasty message. It actually read like it was written by my mother, which would explain the projection that happened later, saying that his reply clearly came from me and that I was using the children as weapons and to control people. Wow, how ironic. This entire conversation happened while I was blissfully unaware of all of it, having thought my aunt would be in touch soon to speak about what happened and mentioning giving her space. No one had asked me if they could see my children or contacted me personally about birthday gifts for my son. I'd have likely facilitated that for his birthday. But they went through my ex-husband, and when he said he didn't want to be involved with my family, we've been separated now for 5 years, my aunt insulted my ex and me, accused me of generally being a trashy person, said I was manipulating my ex with my version, that maybe there's a reason she won't let you hear our version because it won't be the same as hers. Tell him your version, please. Then I'd actually get to hear what I've done. Again, they were accusing me of horrid things and saying and doing things that I was entirely innocent of. And I knew nothing about it until he sent me the screenshots of their messages, his reply, and my aunt's final response lashing out. It was the last straw. I blocked them all and changed my phone number. I've no idea what's wrong with these people, but I never did find out what I was accused of. I thought my aunt was on her way to being ready to tell me about it soon, and I gave her the space she requested. Then a few days later, she was just spewing vitriol towards me and accusing me of more trash I didn't do and making wild assumptions. Again, all without ever speaking to me. I managed to become the bad guy all over again, and they likely will always believe their version. It's okay, I know mine. It just sucks. It just really cemented it for me that my mother must have been laying the groundwork for this for years, because I've had nothing but polite interactions with the family for years, and this clearly shows a high level of hostility about me and my character. This couldn't have happened overnight, or with just one lie, surely. Yeah, OP, I completely agree, and it just makes it very confusing. I mean, to be honest, I'm confused, and I'm not involved in this story in any way, obviously. So I can't imagine how you feel. Like, imagine, actually put yourself in OP's shoes for a second. Like, I'll try and do it myself. All of a sudden, your entire family is just looking at you shadily, and they're not telling you what's going on. And you're trying to be your normal self with them, but they're being all like weird and standoffish. And then I suppose over the years, you work out that one of them really just detests you. Then you're not allowed to go all of a sudden to your granddad's funeral. I mean, that is mental, by the way. I went to my granddad's funeral, about a year ago now. And I was going to say it was great. It really wasn't great. But you know what I mean? It was lovely to be there. And it meant a lot being there. I can't imagine not being allowed to be there. It'd be ridiculous. Like, sorry, I can't. Wow, it was great. We had a great time. We did. It was lovely. You know what I mean? Okay, be serious for a second. But what I will say is this. Your family, and maybe it's just your mother, but I also put a massive blame on everyone else for just siding with her and not like doing their due diligence, reading between the lines and thinking, maybe I should actually qualify these statements that she's making. And again, we have no idea what they are, so it's tough to say what you're being accused of. But yeah, maybe think to yourself, maybe I should actually just think, maybe what I'm hearing is a little bit off. Let me find out the truth, or at least let me find out the other side of the story by speaking to you. But no, you're just going along with your mum. It's strange. And we haven't even talked about the abuse. Mental story, but somehow that's only the first one in this episode. There are 3 more to come. Let's get on to the second. You want us to break up? Fine. My mother-in-law is truly awful. She constantly makes remarks about me not deserving my fiancé. We are a sort of modern couple, with him bringing in 70% of the money and doing about 30% of the household chores, and me vice versa. It's not an exact math, of course, but we're content with the workload and bill division. And that should be that, by the way. That's a great balance. Congrats. Anyway, my mother-in-law thinks that I should do all the chores and calls my job a small part-time gig that I should be happy to do to help out without neglecting my duties. My fiancé disagrees, but going low contact is difficult when his father and his sister-in-law, my brother's wife, and I have gotten so close. So my fiancé, his brother and sister-in-law and I schemed to have me break up with him in front of his mum and just leave a wake of disastrous consequence to show her. Wow, that is so conniving and so good. That is actually unreal. So that's crazy. So let me get this straight. You, your fiance, his brother, and then his wife, and also your fiance and his brother's dad are all pranking your fiance's mum? That is phenomenal. Okay, let's carry on. When she next made a remark at New Year's about it being time for him to find a traditional wife, I said she was right, and I broke it off. She was shocked immediately and tried to walk it back. My fiancé had a meltdown begging me to stay while my brother-in-law and his wife instigated by asking my mother-in-law if she was racist. They didn't tell me about this part, but it was funny because she doesn't seem to be racist in any real way. She started to panic as I stormed out, and my fiancé moved back home and has been bugging her to do all the things that I do on the daily, cooking and helping him with his New York Times puzzles. And by the way, New York Times puzzles are elite. And steaming his clothes and claiming she owes him for making me leave. So this woman has been calling me non-stop, begging to talk. And after just 8 days, she showed up at my work to full-on apologize, complete with a confession that blew me away. She legit admitted to thinking that I loved him enough to let her say whatever without consequence, and assumed that bugging me would get me to do more for her son so that he could have more time for her and time to relax. He currently works long hours, as owning a home is a goal for us, and though I also work doubles, she thinks that customer service isn't as hard as IT, even though working with the public is super exhausting. Okay, she's dumb then. I would think that customer service is much harder than IT, not knowing much about either sector, but goodness me, one involves working with people all the time, and we all know what people can be like. I mean, evidence this story. The other is IT. Yeah, a bit more technical, sure, but it's IT. Anyway, she cried and begged me to take him back and said he was lazy. When I, in air quotes, reluctantly agreed, she promised to leave me alone, and the next day sent me a gift basket with C's candy in it. My fiancé admitted he started to be extra needy to her on purpose after the second day because he missed me and wanted to drive her crazy enough to get her to apologize quick. What a phenomenal story. I mean, this is just a phenomenal story. After the severity of the first one, to get a story like this as the second is just so good. Like, I just love that everyone bought into it so much. Your fiancé even moving back in fully to sell this. It's just like, it's so good. Imagine the mum just being like, oh my God, what have I done? I have ruined my son's life and also my son's ex's life for what? Just because I wanted my son to have a bit more free time? Like, she must not have slept for this period of time. Crazy. Absolutely crazy. So good. Now, I don't know about C's candy. I looked it up just to see if it was an actual thing. Pun not intended and not a pun. Apparently, it's a quite a nice candy. Somebody said in the comments, you know it's serious when C's candy gets involved. So yeah, maybe it's like the equivalent of I don't know, getting somebody flowers to apologize. It's top tier stuff, which I suppose makes sense. But yeah, genuinely wonderful story. But sadly, guys, that is the last fun story of this episode, and things now get slightly more serious once again. Revenge on a terrible neighbor. Years ago, I rented a townhouse while working on a studio contract. The house was nice, 2-bedroom that I shared with my girlfriend, now my wife. There was a single attached garage, which is a main part of the story. The next door neighbor, who we'll call Chad, was a real piece of work. He was mid-30s, balding, which he tried to hide with a buzz cut, and one of the shortest men I've ever met. He compensated for his lack of height by having a giant lifted custom pickup truck that was too tall to park in his garage. His other pride and joy was a heavily modified Honda Civic, which he liked to rev the engine loudly most days. Chad had 4 friends who he'd sit with at the end of his driveway and drink beer with all day, leaving empty cans everywhere. When I started renting the house in the spring, Chad was initially friendly, offering to move his car to allow the movers to easier access the house. He parked in both spots, despite a visitor lot right across the street. After the movers left, Chad mentioned that the previous tenants let him use their garage for his car in the winter, as his was full of exercise equipment and the sweet motorcycle he was building. Goodness me, I mean, that is crazy. Just asking to use and actually being allowed to use someone else's property. The old tenants must have been very nice, fair play. I told him that the landlord hadn't given me the key or the access code yet, and the only way I could open the garage was from the inside. Chad mentioned that neither his keys nor the code he had worked anymore either. A bit later, when I was talking to the landlord and mentioned Chad and the garage, he told me to never share the code, the keys, or the garage itself with Chad. The previous tenants had been robbed just after Christmas, the reason why they moved away, and the landlord suspected that Chad and his friends had been the ones responsible, despite there being no evidence. Wow. The landlord changed the locks and access code as part of cleaning up the house for a next tenant. A month or so later, I learned from another neighbor that Chad's dad had been a local cop and died when Chad was a teenager, and the police gave him a pass on disturbance calls and the like, something he took advantage of. Chad kept pressuring me to give him access to my garage and got really angry when I finally told him no. Maybe his temper stemmed from his lack of height or some other factor, but he was upset enough that his friends had to hold him back from physically attacking me. From that point on, I'd find empty beer cans on my lawn. He and his friends would catcall my wife when they saw her alone. He would park his truck blocking access to my driveway, would blast music at all hours of the day and night, and just do other things to make a nuisance of himself. As winter came, things got worse, as he was no longer allowed to park his truck on the street and was denied parking in the visitor lot. Later, some kids vandalized the car cover to his Honda and scratched the paint, which he blamed on me for not letting him use my garage. After the new year, I found all of my exterior Christmas decorations ripped off the house and destroyed on my lawn. I decided to take some revenge. Starting that night, which was the beginning of a really bad cold snap, I watered his car, using the garden hose to spray it down, from 10 PM to 5 AM every 30 minutes or so. By the next morning, a thick layer of ice covered his Fast and Furious mobile, pinning it to his driveway. I hid the garden hose in my garage before anyone saw it. When Chad saw the state of his car, his rage was legendary. He screamed, yelled, and woke up the entire neighborhood with his antics. The police and fire department came, did nothing, and left. Chad's friends tried to use various power tools to free his car, and one of them actually cut into one of the tires and fender using a sawzall. About a week later, the ice had thinned enough that the car popped free. Chad broke the windshield trying to remove large chunks of ice. That is the best, isn't it? When you're trying to sort of help a bad situation and you just make it worse. So good. That spring, my work contract ended and I moved away, free of Chad. I decided to share this story as I'm still good friends with my previous landlord, and he told me that Chad and his friends are now in jail after they got caught robbing a convenience store just after the recent holidays. Why does that not surprise me? Well, all I can say to this is that Chad and his pals are just terrible people. I do not understand why the previous tenants let him use their garage. Maybe, to be fair, they're just lovely people and actually weren't ever going to use it and were like, sure thing. But I mean, Chad just should have felt so lucky and like grateful that he was allowed to use somebody else's property for his stuff. But no, he said, actually, I'm just going to break in and steal your stuff as well. Just like taking liberties. Yeah, I mean, this guy and his mates probably just do deserve to end up in jail. And I hope that happens. I don't think there's any more I can say than that. Good revenge, but I feel like more needs to be done. Yeah, it's tough about his dad, but that doesn't excuse his actions now. Now moving on to our final story of this one. And I've just had a quick scan through, guys. And I've noticed that one of the characters is a little bit close to home. Anyway, I ruined my ex-best friend's reputation for spreading rumors about me. I just remembered this story from high school, and I thought you guys would find some enjoyment out of it. When I was a sophomore in high school, my best friend of 5 years, let's call her Sarah, blocked me on everything and refused to acknowledge my presence. When I tried to talk to her, she would immediately walk away. If I was speaking in class, she'd put her head down and cover her ears. When I had mutual friends ask her if I did something wrong, she would just say, I just got tired of her. She's annoying and loud. I have a more chill aura and she's ruining my vibe. Now, you know what, guys? When somebody says they have a chill aura, 99% of the time, it definitely means they have a chill aura. Not embarrassing. I mean, not one of the most embarrassing things you could possibly say about yourself ever. Humility. Yeah? Learn some, Sarah. Anyway, let's carry on. Her other reasons for cutting me off, according to mutual friends, were 1. I was too clingy for always expecting to sit next to her at lunch. 2. I was too needy for wanting to call her after school once or twice a week. And 3. Her mum, whom I had only met once when I was 11 during a field trip, didn't like me. I was heartbroken, but I accepted her choice. I'm not going to beg for someone to love me if they do not want to. However, when a mutual friend told me that Sarah was telling people that I was fat, ugly, and disgusting, and also spreading around my SA story from the year prior and telling people that I was 100% lying about it, we went to a small school of only 300 people, including staff and teachers, so news travels quickly. I saw red. You don't have to like me, but spreading false info about a deeply traumatic experience and saying I lied about it? So on to the revenge. Sarah was a deeply delusional person when it came to relationships. In freshman year of high school, she had a huge crush on our 25-year-old married English teacher. She bought baby clothes, embroidered his children's names on them. What? Embroidered his children's names on them and then put them in a box at the foot of her bed. That is the most that is so twisted. What the hell? I mean, that's not even like weird. That's just downright deranged. Sorry. When I asked her why the actual F she would do that, she said it was for when she turned 18 and she could finally steal him from his wife. Never mind the fact that the clothes would obviously then be too small for his kids by that time, but that is freaking crazy. After she moved on from our teacher, she then attached herself to a boy in our grade. We'll call him Jack. Now, I will be honest here, guys. This was the name that I saw when I just quickly scanned this story. And I have to interject here and say, I do not blame Sarah for this at all. This has happened to me multiple times in my life, and it will happen to me again. Nothing I can do about it. It's just my name and how cool I am. I like to think that at times it's because I have a very chill aura about me. I might be wrong. Anyway, Jack was in a relationship of 5 or 6 months with his girlfriend, Tiff. Sarah was convinced that she could home wreck them and made a public Instagram account to post poems about Jack. Is this story about me? I'm not sure. Not too bad, right? Well, actually, these poems were about how Tiff was an awful person and she deserved to die so that Sarah and Jack could be together. The only layer of anonymity in this account was the fact that the name was only her initials. Jesus. I knew about the account, and once I heard what she'd been spreading around about my appearance and assault, my 15-year-old self knew exactly how to get back at her. I knew Jack's sister from a club that we did a few years prior. We weren't friends, but were definitely friendly. One morning, I saw her in the halls, and I asked if Jack was still dating Tiff. She said, yeah, why? I told her, oh, That's so weird because I actually found this Instagram account that Sarah made that made me think that maybe they were a thing now. I showed her the account, and of course, she took screenshots of everything and sent it to Jack. 5 hours later, the account was deleted, and Sarah didn't come to school for 2 days. I heard from mutual friends that Jack and Tiff both sent her long, not so nicely worded texts about her behaviour and the account. Sarah got a reputation for the rest of high school for being crazy, delusional, and boy crazy. Jack's sister never told anyone that I was the one who told her about the account, so nobody ever found out that I was the one who told her. We are now in our early 20s, and since high school, I have lost 100 pounds. Wow. Had a glow up, and by the way, she's put this in air quotes. She's not saying, I suppose, that she's now really good looking, but yeah, probably had a glow up. If you lose 100 pounds, that's absolutely insane. Have a loving fiance that I started dating senior year of high school, a well-paying career, and a large support system of loving friends. Sarah, on the other hand, has never been in a relationship. I would argue against that. I think she's been in a couple of relationships with her old English teacher and Jack. They were just pretty one-sided relationships. Anyway, she has no friends. She dropped out of college junior year. She lives with her parents and still can't drive. Hang on a second. I'm not in a relationship currently. I do have friends that didn't drop out of college junior year, but I am also living with my parents right now, and I also don't drive. I'm feeling slightly attacked here. Anyway, was I a jerk? Definitely. Was it the right thing to do? Probably not. Do I regret it? A little bit. But at least no one believed her anymore when she talked about how much I was lying about one of the most traumatic things that has ever happened to me. And that is the main point, I think, at the end there. Like, to lie about that is just ridiculous. And when I say lie, I of course mean that Sarah is the one lying, not OP, obviously. I mean, that is crazy. She is obviously, as I said, a deranged individual anyway. But there is a limit, isn't there? And obviously we got to that when she said that you were fat, ugly, and disgusting. That's just bullying. But on top of that, spreading that your essay, well, first of all, spreading around your essay story, which I presume not everyone in the school knew about, obviously, and then saying you lied about it on top of that. So first of all, telling people about what your actual trauma is, ridiculous, and then saying, oh, actually, no, but she just did it for attention, or maybe not that, but just none of it's true, is genuinely crazy. I think that should be illegal. Like bullying is one thing, but then like telling people about someone's trauma, which is, you know, obviously illegal in itself, the trauma, then saying they lied about it, like that. I know you're only like 15 or whatever here, but is that not some sort of like defamation? Like, people genuinely would unalive themselves for stuff like this. That has to be illegal. It has to be. I pretended to be gay so that 2 loudly homophobic guys would get arrested. This is a true story that happened a few years back. I'm sitting at a bar, 3 beers deep, with a group of heterosexual guys, I should add, friends that I hadn't seen in a while. 2 guys at the table next to us start using homophobic slurs for no reason, ranting about how gay people are disgusting, etc. Now, of course, we couldn't let that fly, and we asked them if they had a problem with it, and that we were, in fact, homosexual ourselves. The first guy suddenly jumps on my friend, breaks his glasses, and tips our entire table and drinks on the ground. To this day, we believe they were on some kind of drug, as they had a truly weird and aggressive behaviour. The bartender, a 6-foot-tall metal guy with a beard, arrives at the scene to hear, "This guy just jumped us because we are gay." The guy keeps being aggressive. The bartender immediately breaks his nose with a punch. The police arrive at the scene, the bartender corroborates our story, and the police arrest both guys. We had to testify at the police station so that my friend would get his new glasses reimbursed. We kept the same story all night, so the 2 guys got a hate crime charge. Well, there we go. A pretty chaotic start to this episode, but goodness me, that is the justice and the outcome that we all wanted to see. I mean, yeah, I completely agree with you. It would be very strange if these guys weren't on some sort of drug. I mean, the way they've acted there is just absolutely insane. I mean, being homophobic is one thing, but then jumping on someone who says they're gay, maybe they just are like that, and I know people like that do exist, but that seems a little bit extreme. Nonetheless, though, I can't believe people like this do exist, and thank God that they're getting charged. I would actually love to know, and let me know in the comments down below if you know. What can I expect? What can we expect these people to get charged with? Like, are they going to go to prison? Are they going to have to do community service? Are they just going to have to pay a fine? Will they kind of get off? I have no idea. Let me know if you know in the comments down below. Whatever the punishment is, it should be worse. Let's move on. Made my racist co-worker uncomfortable after he made a joke? Oh well. I am a 23-year-old woman, and I've been at my job for about a year. I'm one of the youngest in my department, and one of the few women of my background. I usually ignore workplace banter, but one co-worker, Stephen, who is 34, has a habit of making subtle comments that don't sit right with me. At first, it was small things. He'd ask where I'm really from, or joke about how I must be great at handling spicy food. I never made a big deal out of it. But last week at lunch, he decides that apparently I am lucky they probably needed to hit their diversity quota. I'm guessing he always does this sort of thing, because everyone let out a good old chuckle. I almost hesitated, then I let it go, and I said, maybe, but it's crazy how I got promoted so fast, whilst you've been in the same role for like 10 years? Maybe they have a quota for that, too. I'm guessing everyone got uncomfortable because the room went dead silent. You could hear the clock on the wall almost. Stephen looked at me like a kicked dog and said that he was just joking. I didn't really care to hear it, so I just smiled. Later, my manager told me that Stephen felt humiliated and that I should have been more professional. I said I responded the same way he spoke to me. Yeah, Stephen, feeling humiliated and you should be more professional in the office. Look in the mirror, mate. Go into the gents and look in the mirror. What are we doing here? Stephen said that he was just joking with you. Well, why didn't you just say to him, I'm just joking with you, man. How do you like it? Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Also, it's not really that he's just joking, is it? Because it's just racist, or xenophobic. I don't know exactly what your background is, but I can probably guess from what he's saying about, where are you really from and handling spicy food, that it is just disgustingly racist. So it's not even joking in the first place. It's just racist. Now, if you like stories about racists getting completely destroyed, the next one is one that you're going to love as well. My dad claimed to be Mexican and severely humbled a lady. My mum and dad were at my mum's company Christmas party years back. There were drinks flowing, and in the elevator on their way to gather her things with a few colleagues, a lady started to go on a rant about Mexicans. A little bit of a theme in this one so far. You can imagine what she said, and none of it was flattering. My dad has black hair. He also worked outside very often and was quite tanned still, despite it being winter. Mind you, his heritage is straight up English and Irish, maybe a hint of German. He listens to her rant while the elevator moves, and just before they got off, turns and says, "My dad is Mexican." This lady went dead white and stumbled over herself trying to apologize. She proceeded to apologize to my mother for about 6 months. Every person in the elevator, aside from this lady, knew that my dad was not at all Mexican. Some of them were though, so all of them refrained from telling her that he lied. She ended up leaving the company, believing that she'd mortally offended her co-workers, actually supervisors, if I remember correctly, husband, with her racist ranting. And I hope she thought twice before she opened her mouth again. I don't think she should have had to leave the company there, guys. I think she should have been fired. I'm sorry. Doesn't matter if anyone's Mexican or not. Someone should have reported her. That's crazy. Now, what's great is that people in the comments here are saying, as a Mexican, your dad is officially an honorary Mexican now. So he's doing the God's work, and he is standing up for Mexicans and also just minorities in general that do suffer racist abuse. Just like this, once again, just pure xenophobia. I don't really get why people like this exist, and I'm sorry, I've got to double down. It should not take someone to be a fake Mexican to get this lady to leave the company. And it shouldn't take her to leave the company. Anyone in that elevator should have just said, this is what just happened. One person corroborates it. I mean, ideally everyone, but all you need is one person. And surely she's gone. You can't have someone like that working at a company. It doesn't matter how good they are at their job at all. Or if anyone Mexican was in the lift or not. It's just racism. Get her out of there. It's actually pretty disgusting that she left seemingly on her own terms. Ridiculous. Also, why was she just upset when she got caught? So pretty much, if there had been no Mexicans in the elevator and everyone would have agreed with her and said, yeah, you know what, you're so right, man, we hate them. She would have been like, yeah, we do. I hate them. But no, because one person was actually Mexican, or at least claimed to be Mexican, she then felt upset about it. What if other people in the elevator weren't Mexican themselves, but I don't know, had Mexican friends or people they knew that were Mexican? Like, this woman is so stupid that she felt sorry because somebody was Mexican, but didn't feel sorry because of what she said in the first place to people that she thought weren't Mexican. I don't know. Dumb woman, get her out the company. Why does she get to work from home and I can't? At my job, we're supposed to be in the office a couple of days a week. I'm in almost every day, as that's my preference, while others stick to their work from home days quite strictly, which is also fine. But I have one colleague who I work with closely that previously came into the office, but now gets to work from home full time. And I'll add that she is great at her job and a joy to work with. Slowly, it was noticed by a few people that she was never in the office, and they started making comments how it was strange, she was lucky, she must have found a reason for an exemption or has some sort of special arrangement. They would look at me and wait for me to say something negative or complain, but I wouldn't say much other than that she works from home due to personal reasons, as it's not my info to share with others, and she is always available virtually if people need to meet or chat about a project. We were having a larger Teams meeting recently, and one of these nosy Nancys raised it in a passive-aggressive way, saying how she hasn't seen her in ages and she's always at home, and it would be great to see her in the office sometime, as their team all have to be in a couple of days a week. I sat there just sipping my tea, while my co-worker dropped the bomb that her husband has been having seizures due to a rapidly growing brain tumour, and he can't be left alone. She went on to add how she wishes she could get out of the house more often, but can't even leave for coffee or groceries unless one of the kids is home, or she can get a friend or family member to stop by, and that the other option was to go on leave, but she felt like it would be a burden to the team and she can still get the work done from home. Let's just say the horrified looks people had and the awkward silence has ensured that hasn't come up since. Yeah, good. That is just what you want to see from this sort of story. People that are just being too nosy, getting it. Now, don't get me wrong. I probably, like at first, if I was a part of this person's team and they were never in and I didn't hear any explanation, I might be like, oh, how come they're not coming in? Like, we got to come in every day. What's going on here? But I feel like after about 1 minute of thinking about it, I'd probably think to myself, oh, yeah, there's probably a reason here that they're not coming in. And especially when someone says it's a personal reason to you, then you definitely do not bring it up. But I mean, look, don't get me wrong. I understand why people would be like, oh, where is she? But then surely you have a conversation and think, something's probably at play here. And then you just do not ask ever and you just leave it be. Ultimately, if she's still employed by the company, still doing her job well, which is amazing given the circumstances, who are you to question what's going on? Or if she just has months of unpaid leave and isn't there. Again, you can't say, it's a disgrace unless you know what's going on isn't something like this. But yeah, I mean, like, I suppose the main point is just chill out and just don't like go meddling when you don't need to. I hope that your co-worker OP and her family are doing better, because what a terrible thing to be going through. Not helped by her colleague saying, where are you? It's unfair. Come into work right now. I'd rather have them safe. Years ago, I was struggling with keeping everyone safe on a trip to town. I had a couple of kids on feet and one in a wheelchair. The two on feet were absolutely determined to run away anytime my back was turned. As it happened, there was a pet store right next to the fabric store I needed to go to when one of the kids made a break for it into the parking lot. Instead of heading to the fabric store, I grabbed said child, plopped him on top of the kid in the wheelchair with instructions to not move a muscle, and I headed to the pet store instead. When we got inside, I headed straight to the leash and collar aisle, and I started the process of fitting the two on feet for harnesses and leashes. The kids thought this was a great adventure, and I even let them pick out their own colours. Then here comes some old Bitty with her pocket dog. She started out with just huffing and sighing, but within about 30 seconds, she evidently couldn't control herself any longer. That's the most cruel thing I've ever seen, treating children like dogs. From my crouched position, I replied, well, I'd rather have them treated like dogs than hit by a car, and I went back to fitting the harness that I was working on. All she could come up with was, well, I guess. The kids got their harnesses and leashes, I got my fabric, nobody got hurt. Later on, when we went to Disney, we had people stopping us and offering up to $100 for the harnesses. Nope, sorry, you can hit up the pet store for your own. Okay, what I will say is, reading this story, I was a little bit surprised by the fact that you, OP, went into a pet store to get your kids a lead and a harness. I'm presuming, by the way, that these aren't harnesses and leashes for kids, unless pet shops actually have these things for kids. I doubt they do. However, actually, maybe it's thinking on your feet. Very clever. And as you can see by the people in Disney who were probably like, whoa, that's a good idea. You've done well. I just can't get over the fact that your kids are wearing dog harnesses. Again, I might be wrong. If pet shops do have harnesses and leads for kids, I'm pretty confident they don't, because the clue's sort of in the name of the shop. But anyway, I completely agree with you. Like, it's better that they're safe. However, I would think it's a bit strange, like, that they're just knocking about in a dog harness. Now, if they were in like a normal kids harness, I would say 100% yes. And I have absolutely nothing against kids wearing harnesses with a lead on. You know, it's not like the best thing to see, because you'd be like, oh, well, they're human. It's not ideal. But also they are a young child who could easily just run into a road and die. So yes, I completely agree with you. I'd rather have them safe as well. However, this woman, I mean, I honestly, I can't like say she's like completely in the wrong. Because, like, imagine you're just walking along and you see two kids in dog harnesses with a leash. Again, they might not be dog harnesses. I'm happy to hold my hands up if they're not. But I'd be like, okay, what's going on here? So this is probably the one story that I've read so far where I'm a bit more like, well, whatever. You know what? Let me just look this up, right? Leash and collar pet store for kids. It's like, do they do that? They can't. No, it's all pet collars. I'm not being an idiot here, am I? I guess a kid could wear... This is the thing. Actually, like, is a dog harness... Would it not fit on a kid? I mean, it's pretty similar. You just put your arms through it. Maybe I take it back somewhat. Maybe it wouldn't look that weird. And also, I have to remember this. The kid doesn't have to walk on all fours like a dog. It's a great point there. Anyway, let's move on to the next story. Another post reminded me of my blind friend's story about getting her eyes examined. A friend of mine is BLIND blind, like both eyes removed as a toddler with no memory of vision blind. She has prosthetic eyes for both appearance and maintaining the sockets. I'm not exactly sure what it means, but apparently it can cause problems not having orbs in the orbital sockets. She told me the story of how once she went into her eye doctor, obviously to check on her sockets and other anatomy, not her eyes. And the new to her assistant that checked her in asked her to do a routine vision check. I'm completely blind, she told the assistant. Oh, we know, but just so we can get a proper exam of your eyes, we need a record of your vision. My friend kept insisting she was so very, very blind. The assistant kept insisting they needed the exam to check on her eyes. Finally, fed up, my friend popped out one of her prosthetic eyes and held it out to the assistant and said, "Here, now you can examine it all you want." The doctor was apparently apologetic. I asked why her guide dog wasn't a giveaway. She hadn't brought her, as it was just easier to have her husband take her. I don't know how her needing the assistant to guide her to the room wasn't a hint, but, well, I guess she figured it out eventually. Now, this sort of story I do not get at all, because I would feel like as soon as like you go in to an optometrist or whatever they're called, I've forgotten the word, and you check in or whatever and you say, yeah, I've got an appointment, then they ask for your name, and then surely immediately your information comes up with the fact that you are BLIND and you have two prosthetic eyes. So the assistant knows that. If you're brand new and your prosthetics are really good and you say, I'm blind, and you don't actually actively explain, like, I have two prosthetic eyes, this I don't really like. The assistant can just say what she said and that's all right. Like, you haven't actually, like, when you say you're completely blind, I don't know, I kind of get it from the assistant. Like, she might be like, well, we'll just do an examination for other reasons of your eye, etc, etc. Because completely blind, I mean, that is like, completely is a subjective word when someone is telling it to you. However, if you just said to them, I have two prosthetic eyes, then she would have been like, okay, well, obviously you can't see. However, I feel like it should have just been on your records anyway. The eye test itself would have been very funny, and I kind of feel like you should have just gone through with it and just taken the mick. Like, imagine the person or the assistant or the whatever, the doctor saying, you know, read me that third line on the chart as far down as you can. And you go, what chart? And they're like, the one on the wall. What wall? The one in this room. What room? I don't even know where I am. Because that is how blindness works. I mean, I'm not being an idiot, but I do feel like the assistant asking for just a basic vision test, and again, unless she has the information on her screen in front of her, which she should have done, isn't that crazy of a suggestion? Like, if someone said to me, I'm deaf, completely deaf, and I said, okay, let's do a hearing test, that's not that stupid, because we could be checking for other things at the same time, or like pressure, etc., etc. I'm not trying to let the assistant off. I just think that without the information of I have 2 prosthetic eyes, which you didn't actually say according to this, it's not the most crazy thing ever. I know you guys would disagree with me on that, and that's fine. I just feel like, just say I've got 2 prosthetic eyes. There you go. Now for our final story of this one. Unsolicited family planning advice didn't get him an answer he liked. A couple of months ago, I went out to visit my parents and some family for the holidays. I took an evening to go and visit my aunt and her husband during our trip. Now, I love my aunt's husband. He's a fantastic and loving dad and grandfather, and has always been one of my favourite people. He's pretty solid in his religious faith, but it translates into love, and he supports their family in a way that I've always been envious of. Both my kids are unplanned, having been told before the first that I couldn't have kids, and then my youngest is here despite 3 birth control methods failing, including a condom, planned B, and a month of the patch. We had another pregnancy less than a year after my youngest was born from failed birth control that I terminated, and my partner went for a vasectomy a month after that. My partner and I currently pay more in daycare than our mortgage, and our oldest also has an autoimmune condition. We have no familial support system. We're just barely making it financially and mentally, so we have decided that our youngest is definitely our last. During this visit, my aunt took my oldest to go work on her Lego advent calendar, while I chatted with her husband, Paul, in the living room, and my toddler played with the dogs. We discussed how cute my little one was, and Paul asked if we were having any more. Now, all my family knows how my last pregnancy ended. I'm not ashamed of it, so he actually already knew this before asking. I told him, no, my 2 were more than enough, and my partner is sterile now. We don't have the support or funds to care for another without making the 2 we have suffer. He said, you never know, the next one could be an angel. And I shot back before I could catch myself. Technically, the next one is an angel. Oh, wow. What a line, by the way. That might be one of the best single lines of rebuttal I've ever heard. That just sums up this subreddit so well. Wow. That is just 7 words that are just plucked from heaven, for want of a better phrase, but just pure perfection from OP. Sorry. That is just phenomenal. Anyway, we both had a cringe face for a moment, and then he quickly moved on to a new topic of conversation. I know he meant well because he loves his family and grandbabies. His family is everything to him. But it's like it didn't click that most people don't have a supportive family, and having kids these days is expensive and exhausting, even with support. Okay, and there we go. What a way to end this one. As I said, one of the most generational lines I've ever read, and I don't use the word generational lightly. Phenomenal stuff. Terrible from Paul, like absolutely terrible. The fact that he knew about you terminating your last pregnancy and still said that is disgusting. But also, I've got to say well done to you, because that is such a sensible decision you've made. Like, so many people, I feel like, do not give the required thought to having a child. And even when they've had a couple of children, they think, okay, I'll go again. And you know, you make such a good point about it affecting your children's lives if you have a third one, because you know you're not going to make any more money per se. So then 2 into 3, or the money you have for 2 kids is now being split into 3. That's a big difference. And I think if more people acted and thought like this, the world would probably be a better place. I'm not saying to not have kids, by the way. Like, kids are great. I will hopefully have kids myself, and I definitely plan to. But if it's financially going to be extremely challenging to give them the life that they need and deserve, I'm sorry, but you shouldn't do it. And I do think more people should think like that. Fair play to you, OP. Paul, you're a gimp. Someone tried to stop me from using the women's bathroom because they mistook me for a guy. This happened when I finally had the nerve to try a pixie cut hairstyle. I was really happy about it because it felt like me. I will admit that when I shop for clothes, I do not care for gender norms. For example, I bought a man's Hawaiian shirt because it felt breezy to me, and I really liked its fabric. So, onto the story. I was in the mall with my then boyfriend and went straight for the women's bathroom as usual. There was no one there except for a woman putting on makeup. I went inside and was almost close to one of the stalls when said lady quickly approached me with makeup tools still in hand. "Isn't this comfort room for women only?" And I was confused. Like, yeah? Because there's obviously a big sign out there. But then I realized she was staring intently at my chest, as if trying to determine if I'm really a girl or some guy entering a woman's bathroom. And I really don't understand why she'd think of the latter, because I was wearing short shorts with leggings. Sure, I was wearing the breezy men's Hawaiian shirt, but it was unbuttoned and loose to reveal a tight black tank top underneath. Like, that's definitely feminine. The whole situation felt so ridiculous to me that I made eye contact, pointed in the direction of my shorts with both hands, and casually asked, "Wanna check?" If she's gonna make this weird, I'm gonna make it weirder. Wanna enter a stall with me and have a peek? Sure, why not? We're both women, sarcastically. I like to think the silence that followed made her realize who was being a creep, because she backed out immediately and said no. I finally did my business in the stall, and while I was washing my hands, she apologized, and I told her it was no big deal. But I have to apologize for the trans people out there who get treated like that when they're just minding their own business. Okay, and there we go. That is it for the first story. And that is what I mean when I say in the introduction that if you don't know this subreddit, you get to know it very quickly. That is the beauty of r/traumatize them back. You see the instant karma. Whereas, on like r/ProRevenge or Nuclear Revenge, or even like Petty Revenge, sometimes you don't actually see that immediate revenge. You don't even ever sometimes get the payoff. Whereas here, it's always pretty instant. I mean, at least most of the time. And that is the beauty of this sub. This is something that I really would love to do. And again, I think I've been saying this for like the last 6 years now. It's very, very rare that I ever find myself in a situation like this. But I do think the thing to do is just go with weirdness and sarcasm if someone's coming at you being weird. And just try and make them feel as uncomfortable as possible. It's just funny. And look, you could have taken this really personally and got really angry, but I do think that's kind of what this woman wanted. Now for our second traumatize them backstory. My father accused me of not being sick while I had a heart attack. Back in 2017, when I was just 17, I had a heart attack. It happened on Christmas Eve of all days. Instead of getting support from my family, my father accused me of making the whole thing up for attention. I hate attention at family gatherings. I was rushed to our local hospital, and things were so serious they had to transfer me by ambulance to a larger hospital in the city because they couldn't treat me locally. You'd think that would have been proof enough that this wasn't some ploy for attention, but no. I ended up needing surgery, and I went through a tough 2-month recovery period. It was one of the most physically and emotionally challenging times of my life. Through all of that, my father never once visited me in the hospital. He was too scared and ashamed to show up, and he's never apologized for how he treated me during one of the worst moments of my life. To this day, we don't speak. I've cut him out of my life because I realized I deserve better than a parent who accuses me of faking a life-threatening medical emergency. Yeah, I feel like your last sentence there, OP, really does sum up this entire thing. Why would you ever want someone like that in your life? Imagine you're about to die, you're dying, your heart is failing, and your dad just goes, "Stop messing around, man. Like, you're fine. Just chill. Stop trying to get attention. You little rat." The anger would just be, palpable. Family calls me to get me to go back home. I revealed the reason why I left. So, I've left home. I'm more or less homeless and lodging in a hotel that a friend paid for. God bless his heart. This is due to my mum physically assaulting me for the first time since my dad died. That reason is a story for another day. She slapped me 3 times and my face got swollen, so I left 4 days later. I had already been planning on leaving later this year because she's been more or less stealing from me, or more accurately, stealing from my late dad's estate that he left for me in his will. She's been selling some properties, and it's 2 years ago that I found out that that's actually a crime. When I tried to get her to do the right thing, she called me a gold digger, and since then, so many things have happened. I've gotten a lawyer and we're working the logistics out to get what's mine. After leaving home last Friday, I've had a barrage of calls from family members. Everyone has been trying to convince me to come home, and even trying to evoke my late dad's name to get me to come home. We were very, very, very close. Cue this incident. My in-law calls me on Sunday and says that my mum came to his house and told him what's happening. He starts with saying that I'm making the wrong decision. I'm going to be wrong, 2 wrongs don't make a right, etc, etc. He doesn't know that my mum slapped me, and I don't tell him because he says, and I quote, "I won't ask what made you leave yet. I want you to go back so we talk about it." He keeps on saying that the path I'm on is wrong, and so many people who have gone on the path I'm on didn't have it ending well for them. All I try to say falls on deaf ears. And since we're Muslim, he starts quoting hadiths to support him and me going back. After he's done going on a tangent, and I finally get the chance to speak, I tell him that I'm thanking him for the concern. And even though I'm not ready to tell him the full story, I just want him to know that the main reason I've left is because my mum is stealing from an orphan. Now, in my religion, when your dad dies, you're classified as an orphan. So I was letting him know that my mum was stealing from me. And in our religion, stealing from an orphan gives you an automatic and cemented ticket to hell. As you guessed it, he decided to actually listen now. He stopped trying to guilt me to going home. After I gave him a summarized version of events, he starts saying we need to talk to my mum, I need to tell the family, etc., promptly forgetting his mission to get me to go back home. I felt very satisfied when he apologized and said he's sorry I'm going through that and we need to rectify it, so I should update him on whatever happens next. Safe to say he hasn't called me since. And since that experience, any other family member who calls, I just let them know that she's stealing from me, and each and every one of them stops asking me to go back home. Now everyone knows, or will eventually, I guess. In all this, it seems my mum didn't expect me to leave home, and she's been very remorseful and worried, but it's a little too late for that, I guess. Sometimes, it's just not fair, is it? Why have you lost your father when you were so close to him, but not your mum, who just treats you so horribly and is just a genuinely horrible person? It's just like, I don't know, it's just tough, isn't it? So you're dealing with all that grief and the fact that you've lost, maybe the person that was closest to you in your life, definitely your closest parent or I presume family member. And then on top of all of that, you've got this. And the good news is that your family are now beginning to understand how terrible your mother is. And, I kind of get it from their perspective a little bit. They're hearing these things from your mum, and then she's like, please try and get my kid back. I don't know why they've left. So then they're trying to get you back, which it makes sense. But then after hearing the truth, I'm glad that they're switching sides and actually understanding what's happened and why you've made those decisions. So yeah, again, the main point is it's just a very, very sad situation. Now for our fourth story. And if you thought, guys, for one quick, cheeky second, that the stories, after the first, second or third, we're going to get a little bit more tame or sort of filler just, to flesh out the episode, then how about this for a title? Lunch supervisor tried to inject my sister with insulin she didn't need. I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at a pretty young age, 8. I'm actually really lucky that I was able to have such a good support system during my primary school years. All my teachers knew that I had diabetes, as well as the lunch ladies and the lunch supervisors. And they never really treated me differently, apart from being concerned for me sometimes. This actually concerns a lunch supervisor who me and my sister, suspect to be kind of racist, and it happened a few months, around 5, after I got diagnosed. For context, we are black. And when we were younger, me and my sister, who I'll call Brenda for clarity, were pretty much identical, despite the fact that she was a year younger than me. It got to a point that relatives used to remark that people could almost mistake us for twins. Now at school that wasn't really a problem because we used to act very differently. I was more introverted and very much into books, while she was a quintessential extrovert and was always more fierce. And for people who have seen us day in and day out, it was clear that we were different. Despite the fact that this supervisor knew us by name, by face, and could differentiate us, she would always act snide to us in a way that was uncomfortable. Our school was incredibly diverse, with a minority of white people and mostly Asian and black people, so I honestly don't know where this came from. Anyway, this supervisor knows that I take insulin for lunch, and that I'm to go straight to the nurse once it's lunchtime. I was even allowed to leave early sometimes to get my dose. One day, she sees my sister playing in the playground before they call us for lunch. We were allowed to play for around 15 minutes before lunch, eat lunch, and then get 30 minutes to play again before classes started back up. And, I'm paraphrasing from my sister here, grabbed my sister and started dragging her to the nurse. The nurse's office, in which I and my fellow diabetics would take our insulin, was around a 10-minute walk from the playground, and quite close to both the lunch hall and the pastoral team. And the separate nurse's office for normal scrapes and stuff was really around 2 minutes from the playground. Despite the fact that my sister was crying out, saying, "I'm not OP, I'm Brenda, her sister," She apparently didn't believe her and marched her straight there. She gets to the nurse and sees she's not there. Of course she's not. She's at the normal one and we've already taken our doses. And then tries to force my sister to take insulin. Guys, this is incredibly dangerous for non-diabetics. And despite the fact that my sister was crying at this point, the supervisor didn't care. One of the pastoral team hears this crying, goes to investigate, and comes to the scene. One look at my sister and she asks my sister, "Brenda, are you okay? What's happened?" My sister tells me that the supervisor just went pale, like all the blood drained from her face. Then she goes red, and as my sister is explaining, tries to butt in and say, "Well, she didn't say she was Brenda. How was I to know? I thought she was OP." Yeah, that didn't really fly well. Now, a lot of people, and I assume you guys are wondering as well, what actually happened to this person. And you know what's crazy about it? She didn't get fired, the supervisor. OP has said, "I'm actually sorry," they've left a little edit here. "I'm sorry about the inconclusiveness of the story. I forgot to add it in probably because she didn't get fired. I remember seeing her in year 6. It was 3 years after I was diagnosed. I'm pretty sure she got suspended, not fired, and had to go through rigorous first aid training, as well as being sent, I think that's the word, to the board of directors of which our headmistress was on. I absolutely agree that she should have gotten fired, but she was one of those who'd been there forever. Just because she was there for a long time, though, and was friendly with people, doesn't mean that she shouldn't have gotten fired." I agree with that. Like, surely there are certain things where you're like, I don't really care how long you've been here. This could have been awful. And as you said, this is an incredibly dangerous thing for non-diabetics to have insulin. I mean, I presume that, yeah, you could go into an absolute, I don't know, your body could just get completely screwed up and it could be lethal. That's what I think. Who knows? I might be wrong there, but I don't see why that it couldn't be the case. So, yeah, it could have been so badly. I'm glad that this all ended up okay, but wow, just think. If that had happened, then it would have been the end for the school. Let's be realistic. And that is, I think, reason enough to have fired this supervisor. Way too rash in her decision making for me. Now for our final story of this episode. You really don't want to assume that someone is pregnant. A few years ago, I gained a significant amount of weight suddenly, and I'm still on a very healthy dose of steroids following emergency surgery to remove the tumour that caused that, and a variety of other health issues. Anyone that's ever been on a high dose of steroids for a long time, or had a tumour in their endocrine system, will tell you it's like being possessed. You look like an inflatable balloon and have mood swings that totally change your personality. You have hair in places you shouldn't have hair, and you literally feel so tired you could die on a daily basis. It's a bad time. Do not recommend. So, I was waiting for a train on the way back from meeting a friend. We had a couple of drinks, minding my own business, out of breath and swaying slightly. Not from the drinks, I'd only had a glass of wine. A woman approached me, struck up a conversation. Nothing bad at first. She pointedly referenced that she had 2 healthy pregnancies, and I could see where she was going with this, but I wasn't about to stop her from putting her foot in it. She asked what I'd done for the evening. I said I'd had some drinks with friends, softly hinting to her to maybe quit while she was ahead. Undeterred, after some polite conversation, she slips in, "You really shouldn't be drinking pregnant, not even 1 glass." I'm usually very mildly mannered and not big on confrontation, but Barry the brain tumour had other ideas. I saw red. "Oh, my belly? No, I'm not pregnant, I have a brain tumour. They recently told me it's too late to try radiation and that I'm at risk of a heart attack until they can remove it." I left it at that. Entirely factual. The best thing is that the train went for another 15 minutes. I cheerfully let that be the longest, most silent 15 minutes of her life. There we go. What a way to end this episode. That 15 minutes would have been absolutely joyous. It's so good that this woman couldn't just walk away, but had to just sit there with you, like, I don't know, next to her, whatever, just thinking about what's just happened. It's so good. Yeah, I mean, again, like, as I say with all of these, very sorry you're in that situation. Like, obviously less than ideal, but when you do have something like this take place and you can deal with it like this, it's just pretty awesome. It tells me a lot about your character. The fact that you didn't just, I don't know, back down or get really angry just shows you're pretty awesome, and this woman is a disgrace. But there we go. That 15 minutes, as I said, must have been majestic. The HOA president's long goodbye. When I moved into my suburban neighborhood, I expected peace and quiet. Instead, I walked into a petty dictatorship run by our HOA president, Todd. Todd was the worst kind of leader, the kind who loved power but hated accountability. He enforced ridiculous rules, like fining people $200 for leaving their trash cans out a minute past 9 a.m, but he then blatantly ignored the rules when it suited him. His own yard was a mess of unpermitted structures, and his fence was taller than allowed by city ordinances. But Todd's true sin? Using the HOA as his personal piggy bank. At first, I tried reasoning with him. My fence was slightly off colour because the approved stain wasn't available, and he fined me $500. I explained, provided receipts, and asked for leniency. But Todd smirked and said, "Rules are rules," and walked away. That's when I decided I would take him down, not with screaming or public arguments, but methodically, legally, and in a way he'd never recover from. Step 1. Become the inside man. Todd's first mistake was underestimating me. I volunteered for the HOA board under the guise of wanting to get involved in the community. I played the part of the eager, naive newbie perfectly. For 2 years, I attended every meeting, quietly observing how Todd operated. I learned that he controlled the board by bullying other members and burying them in paperwork. He'd push through votes when only his allies were present and conveniently lose paperwork submitted by dissenting homeowners. I kept my head down, took detailed notes, and I waited. My goal was to outlast his term as president so I could begin making changes. Then I discovered Todd's second mistake. He wasn't just a bully, he was a thief. Step 2. Follow the money. Todd loved to brag about how he kept the HOA's finances in order, but something didn't add up. The annual HOA fees were high, much higher than in similar neighborhoods, but the common areas were falling apart. The pool was closed half the summer due to maintenance issues, and the landscaping looked like it hadn't been touched in months. I started digging. As the HOA treasurer, Todd had access to all the accounts, but he was notoriously cagey about sharing financial details. I asked for the budget during a meeting, and Todd laughed it off, saying, "Don't worry, I've got it under control." I filed a formal request for the financial records, which, under HOA rules, he was required to provide. Weeks went by with no response, and that is when I started talking to neighbours. It turns out I wasn't the only one who was suspicious. Over a dozen homeowners had requested access to the budget over the years, only to be ignored. One neighbour claimed that Todd had used HOA funds to install a new patio at his house, while another swore that he'd seen Todd's kids at the community pool during its maintenance closure. Armed with these suspicions, I filed a formal complaint with the HOA board, forcing Todd to provide the records. He stalled, but I wasn't backing down. Step 3. Build the case. When Todd finally handed over the financial documents, they were a mess. Invoices were missing, payments were mislabeled, and some expenses were downright bizarre. A $15,000 landscaping fee paid to a company that didn't exist. Thousands spent on administrative costs with no explanation. I cross-referenced the HOA's bank statements with public records, and I found the smoking gun. Todd was funneling money to his personal accounts. Even better, I discovered that Todd had been inflating contractor fees, pocketing the difference, and splitting the profits with his buddy, a shady contractor who handled most of the HOA's maintenance. I compiled everything into a detailed report, complete with spreadsheets, photos, and notarized statements from neighbors who had seen Todd's antics firsthand. Step 4. The coup. I waited for the annual HOA meeting, which was typically a snooze fest attended by only a handful of homeowners. But this time, I made sure people showed up. I spent weeks knocking on doors, explaining what Todd had been up to. I didn't share everything, just enough to get people angry and curious. On the night of the meeting, the room was packed. Todd started the meeting like usual, droning on about how difficult it was to manage the HOA and how much he'd sacrificed for the community. That's when I stood up. I calmly asked if he could explain some discrepancies in the budget. Todd laughed nervously and said, "I don't think this is the time or place." I replied, "Actually, Todd, it's the perfect time." I handed out copies of my report to everyone in the room, and the mood shifted instantly. People started reading, whispering, and then shouting. Todd tried to regain control, but it was too late. I called for a vote to remove him as president, and by the end of the night, Todd was out. Step 5. The final blow. After Todd was removed, we hired an independent auditor to go through the HOA's finances. They confirmed everything. Todd had embezzled over $50,000, mismanaged tens of thousands more, and committed multiple counts of fraud. We reported him to the police and filed a civil lawsuit to recover the stolen funds. But it didn't end there. Todd's shady contractor buddy was also exposed and banned from doing business in the county. Todd had to sell his house to pay restitution and legal fees. His name became a running joke in the neighborhood, and nobody would touch him professionally. With Todd gone, we restructured the HOA to prevent another dictator from taking over. We implemented term limits, required multiple board members to approve financial decisions, and created an online portal so that all homeowners could access budgets and meeting minutes. The aftermath. Every time I walk past Todd's old house, now owned by a lovely family, I smile. The pool is open, the landscaping is beautiful, and the HOA fees are lower than ever. Todd, meanwhile, moved to a neighbouring town where he reportedly tried to join another HOA board, only to be laughed out of the room when someone Googled his name. Justice wasn't just served, it was plated, garnished, and savoured. Okay guys, there we go. That is it for the first story. First of all, I just gotta say, just a brilliant story. It genuinely just so good. I loved every second of that, the way it was written, the aftermath, great. One thing I will say though, and you're gonna have to help me out in the comments down below, those of you that are from America, or I presume this is in America, or just where homeowners associations are more prevalent. Help me out in the comments down below. Just how do they work? Because I would have thought that Todd would go to prison for something like this, because surely this is illegal, right? Or at least would be charged. But the fact that he was seemingly free to then move to another community and try to get on, or try to become president of a new HOA, or at least, go on the board. How is that allowed? Ex-wife steals business. A revenge 2 years in the making. This story involves some legal details, but I'm neither a lawyer, nor did I follow those aspects super closely, so sorry for any inaccurate or vague terminology. Buckle up, this will be a long one. Participants. Abe is a young, talented veterinarian. Sophia is his now ex-wife from a very rich family. Yours truly is a humble software developer turned cybersecurity specialist 6 months ago. So let's get into the backstory. Abe and Sophia both worked with my parents, who own a veterinarian clinic. Abe as a veterinarian, Sophia as an assistant. Abe is a bit of a pushover, but a nice guy. Sophia is very manipulative, borderline evil. Around 4 years ago, Sophia was caught stealing from the cash register and was fired. She pushed Abe till he also quit around half a year later. They founded their own veterinary clinic 2 towns over, though much smaller, with Abe being the only doctor. While we all really hated Sophia, and my parents really were mad at Abe for defending her, I still liked Abe, and I wished him the best. I helped him set up a website and some other IT stuff that will come into play later. Okay, so let's get into the story then. So, 2 years after Sophia and Abe started up their own veterinary clinic, it was going well. Legally, Sophia and her family owned 49% of the company. Abe owned 46% and another investor owned 5%. This other investor was supposedly neutral, but turned out to be friends with Sophia's family. Sophia and the investor decided to basically screw Abe out of the business. I don't exactly know why, but having known Sophia for years, I'm assuming Beelzebub warned her she is running low on her quota of ruining lives. Basically, they founded a new veterinary company and started selling the assets of the old company to it for basically no money. Now, of course, since they had over 50% of shares between Sophia and the other investor, they could do this. With this type of organization in my country, 51% control means you have the final say. They couldn't technically just fire Abe, but since they ran the original company into the ground, he was still out. He was the only doctor and did most of the work, and it turned out they had a non-compete clause that meant he couldn't start up a new business. And while he wasn't on the worst possible terms with my parents, the only other clinic in the area that wasn't just a single doctor and could hire him, it was enough of a bridge burned that he basically had no choice of working as a vet in this whole region. So Abe was left with no job, and all the money he invested into his company was effectively stolen. Oh, and they also tried to screw me out of payment for making them some functionality for the clinic's website that let people reserve time slots and receive veterinarians' notes online, and also for setting up their company emails. So then, the actual revenge. So, Abe was out of luck, and I was out having a drink with him to cheer him up, when the topic turned to who the new veterinarian would be to do the actual work. I'm not insinuating that vet assistants don't do actual work. Sophie specifically doesn't. She is actually afraid of dogs and won't hold them. Abe did all the management stuff on the website and ordering medical stuff, even the cleaning. We had no clue, but I was a tad peed, both up and off. So I decided to check if they removed my access to all the IT stuff when we yelled at each other over payment. They didn't. And they didn't change the company email address's password either. We decided to snoop, which was technically barely not illegal, since Abe was part of the company for like 2 more weeks at the time. And this was an overall company email, not Sophie's. We found 3 applicants, all of whom we immediately and very, very rudely rejected. Veterinary medicine is a small world in this country, so good luck with finding another doctor. The actual nuclear part, however, came 2 years later, when Abe was already in the middle of a very long court battle. Since, as you can imagine, what Sophie and the investor did is not exactly 100% legal. I was cleaning up some stuff on my work laptop when I noticed they still didn't manage to remove my access to their system years later. See, we knew the clinic, the new company, was still going on, but they had a hard time finding veterinarians. I can't imagine why, and the ones they could left quickly. As I poked around in their system, I saw that the veterinarian on the different case logs for weeks at a time was written as Sophie in the internal database. See, as it later came out, she was pretending she was an actual vet when there wasn't a real one employed for weeks, and she even forged prescriptions. Now the thing is, me accessing this info is legally dubious at best. Sharing it with Abe would be even worse. In the last couple of years, however, I was studying cybersecurity to become an ethical hacker. And would you know it, idiot never learned any cybersecurity me 2 years ago, accidentally left in a vulnerability that a smart attacker could use to read data from the internal database. In layman's terms, you could inject input that would cause the database to send a request to any old server out there containing this confidential data, such as a server an attacker owns. Just a couple of days later, the leaked database showing Sophie's fraud ended up posted anonymously to a forum I happened to read. For legal reasons, it definitely wasn't me who posted it. I just happened to find it right after it was posted from a fresh account, and I archived it in the 15-minute window before the mods deleted it. I did send an email to Sophia when I first saw the issue in the code. I was worried that me accessing the system would show up in the logs and would be suspicious, saying that I found a security flaw while going through my old code, and to contact me about fixing it. I must have forgotten that she mainly uses the clinic's main address instead of the one that is like sophie@clinicsname.com, which she checks like once a month at best. How forgetful of me. When Abe's lawyer got the judge to order a full audit of these logs and the prescriptions, Sophie tried to delete the full database, failing to remember the backup it makes every week. Now, I'm not a lawyer, but I feel confident giving the advice that trying to delete evidence a judge ordered you to provide does not play well with courts. It strongly looks like she'll end up serving time. As a cherry on top, I helped Abe patch things up with my parents, and he got his old job back. He's been back for a year and just got a promotion and a raise. I'm currently sipping on some rum as I'm typing this that he bought me as a thanks from his first bigger salary. Oh, and one final edit as well. I forgot to originally mention it, but I was reminded while I was replying to a comment. Don't worry, all the animals that Sophia treated are being followed up on by government officials. Abe had access to the logs because of the court case and looked over it as well, though he couldn't follow up with everyone personally. So far, and this is the good news, it looks like she at least didn't harm any animals. She mainly just gave mandatory vaccinations, removed stitches, did drops and sprays against ticks and fleas, that sort of stuff. All perfectly within a practiced veterinary assistant skill set, but still highly illegal, of course. Okay, there we go. That is it for this revenge story. And immediately I want to jump into the comments. Somebody has said, I hope Sophie ends up in jail for a long time. And that makes me think, yeah, like through all of this, I actually have no idea if what she's done, well, I mean, it has to be illegal. Like a lot of the stuff surely has to be illegal. Firstly, there's blatant fraud. But secondly, like the actual like what she did with the company herself, just taking all the money out of it, forcing Abe to leave his job, etc. I get that you have the control of the business, but surely there are laws that mean, okay, I've got 51% control of a business, now I can just completely destroy it and sack all the staff and just, you know, cause them massive trouble, etc., etc. I don't know. Anyway, OP replied to that comment about hoping that Sophie gets jail time, saying, last I heard, the company stuff that they did to Abe is illegal, but it would probably end in just a fine and maybe the non-compete being invalid. But then they move on to talking about, obviously, the vet stuff, which is, yeah, potentially very dangerous. I mean, I know the edit is good in the sense that it sounds like nothing bad happened to the animals. But if you're not qualified to be dealing with animals, then surely that is still animal abuse. I mean, surely. Pretending to be a vet without a license, OP says, treating animals and forging prescriptions, each of those three alone could carry a jail time. And then they also finally say, I forgot to add in the post, but at least it looks like she didn't manage to harm any animals. Okay, this is what they then added as an edit at the end. But yeah, still illegal as anything. But there we go. Yeah, just crazy stuff. The animal thing in particular, that could have gone seriously wrong. I mean, what if she does seem like the sort of person that would just be like so like stupid in her own mind to just think, oh, you know, actually this is going all right. I know I'm not qualified, but I'm doing all right here. Let's just go one step further and start, like actually diagnosing animals, like doing operations, that sort of stuff. I don't care. I'll do it. Like I'm breaking the law anyway. Who cares? But thankfully, it seems as if it didn't get to that point. Crazy stuff nonetheless. And, you know, ultimately, we don't know if there was no harm done to animals. Maybe we'll get an update on this and see. I just really hope that nothing happened. Neighbor ruined my garden. I turned his yard into a swamp. Get ready for a wild ride, folks. This is the story of how my battle with a neighbor over my beloved garden led me to transform his pristine yard into a swamp, and in the process, I became a local legend. It all started when I moved into a new house, which came with a small but charming garden. Gardening quickly became my passion, and I spent months turning that space into a blooming paradise full of flowers and a few veggies. My neighbors seemed to appreciate the view, all except one. Let's call him Grumpy Greg. Grumpy Greg was the kind of guy who took too much pride in his perfectly manicured lawn, the type that looks more like a golf course than a yard. He despised my garden, calling it untidy and an eyesore that attracted pests. I tried to reason with him, offered to keep it more contained, even suggested setting up a small fence. But no, Greg wanted it gone. One morning, I woke up to find most of my garden destroyed. Flowers uprooted, veggies trampled, and my small bird bath smashed. I knew it was Greg. No proof, but who else would it be? I was furious, heartbroken, but then inspiration struck. I remembered Greg's one true love, his flawless lawn. I did some research and found the perfect, most diabolical yet completely legal revenge. I bought hundreds of water retention crystals, the kind meant to help soil retain moisture for plants, except I wasn't planning on using them for their intended purpose. Under the cover of night, I went to work, spreading these crystals all over Greg's precious lawn. These tiny crystals are harmless, but when they come into contact with water, they expand, holding many times their weight in water. And wouldn't you know, the forecast predicted a week of heavy rain starting the next day. The rain came and the crystals did their job too well. Greg's perfect lawn transformed into a squishy, waterlogged mess. Every step taken on the grass felt like stepping on a waterbed. The lawnmower got stuck and the yard had become the neighborhood's newest swamp. Greg was livid, blaming everyone and everything for his misfortune, but he couldn't prove a thing. It took weeks for the effects to wear off, and by then, his lawn never truly recovered. In the meantime, I rebuilt my garden, even better than before. Neighbors who learned about the ordeal and Greg's role in destroying my garden came to help, bringing plants, seeds, and even a new bird bath. My garden became a symbol of the community, a place where neighbors would stop by to chat and admire the flowers. As for Greg, he became a lot less grumpy, especially after I casually mentioned how unpredictable gardening can be, and how it's important to have a good relationship with your neighbors. He got the message loud and clear. So that's the tale of how I turned a bully's yard into a swamp, and in the process, united our little community. Sometimes a bit of creative thinking and a whole lot of water retention crystals is all it takes to stand up to a bully and come out on top. All right, there we go. Now, the cynic in me is saying, and guys, I want to hear your thoughts on this, that this might not be real. I'm going to be honest. It's written almost like a movie script, and I'm not entirely sure. Now, I did know this before recording and narrating this, but I wanted to hear your thoughts more generally, because as I always say with stories like this, there is no way of actually knowing for real if this has happened. I mean, even if I, contacted the person who wrote it and asked them for an interview, they could still lie to me. So we've got no way of knowing if this happened for real. So I can only judge it based on what we've got here. What do you think down below? Some things for me don't add up. Would you really wake up and your whole garden's been destroyed and you didn't wake up at some point during the night? I'm not sure. Can water crystals really cause that much of a mess and that much damage? I'm again not sure. Comment down below, what do you think? I mean, superficially, or at least on the surface, it's a great story of nuclear revenge, but I'm just not sure I believe it. Okay, now moving on to our next story, this one from r/ProRevenge. Landlord screwed with the wrong tenant for too long. The minor details here might not be entirely accurate, as I've no interest in a revival of this conflict on any level. I won completely, and any resurrection can only taint the experience. We'll start off by noting that I spent about 2 decades working in security. During that time, I worked many different types of security in many different locations. The one that matters for this story was time spent in the rental housing tribunal in a major city as a kind of bailiff. For those not knowing what that is, think of a courtroom in a major city anyway. In a smaller town, it will probably be an event room in a hotel or community centre, as you'd see on TV, but with less formality and an adjudicator instead of a judge. They functionally are the same thing to landlords and tenants, but they definitely aren't the same thing. This place exclusively deals with landlord and tenant disputes and is the only place to resolve said disputes. Note that I wasn't a bailiff and it wasn't a court, but these terms most accurately describe the situation and my place in it. Okay, so OP had experience here. For 2 years, I worked at the rental housing tribunal. It was early in my time in security. I was 18 to 20-ish. Being as it was a major city, the sheer number of cases I sat through was beyond my ability to count. I saw everything there was to see. No one is capable of surprising me with a story because I've seen them all. In detail, as a side duty of mine was to ensure that all parties had copies of all evidence being presented, I did a lot of photocopying and always read and inspected everything I copied to ensure that nothing got cut off or made illegible. By the time I stopped working there, I probably knew the way everything worked well enough to be an adjudicator myself. Well, no, obviously not, but I'm certainly in no need of a lawyer either should I ever have the need to go there. I also had intimate knowledge of how the system worked beyond the actual rules. Like, for example, adjudicators would always give a little leeway to anyone representing themselves over someone who had a lawyer, or how annoyed adjudicators would get when a party was speaking out of turn. Seriously, do not do that. Okay, so skip forward almost a decade now. I left the city and I'm in a fairly large town in the same province, with the same tenant laws. I have a few roommates in a decently sized townhouse. We get along well, but there's a problem. Only I can write checks and our paydays don't line up. So I'm the one who pays the rent and I usually can't do it on the first because my roommates don't usually all pay in time. We advise the landlord we might be a day or two late, but we'll always have it by the 3rd at the latest. They have no problem with it at all. I spoke to them myself. For about a year, this works fine. No complaints from the landlord because even if we're often a day or two late, we always pay. We're also fairly quiet and don't damage the property. Nearly model tenants. I do not actually have any idea why, but one day this changed. I suspect a different person in the company started overseeing the region. One day, suddenly, we got a summons to the Rental Housing Tribunal, hereafter to be referred to as RHT, on the 2nd of the month for failure to pay rents. This doesn't actually lead to a case because we paid the same day, but now we have to pay the application fee the landlord paid in order to serve the summons. I complained to the neighbour, who was also the superintendent, and eventually heard back that their contact at the company was now demanding 1st of the month, no exceptions. Well, that really didn't work for us, so we probably had to pay that fee 15 to 20 times over the next 2 years. I could have gone to the tribunal over it, but we were technically without our leg to stand on, and I knew it. Maybe if I went enough times, I could ding them for harassment, but I didn't have time for that, and my roommates don't care. After being split between us all, the fee wasn't enough of a deterrent to change our behaviour, so we accepted it. Now, if this was the only issue, there wouldn't be much story though. At around the same time the rent leeway vanished, so did mandatory maintenance. I'm not going to list everything that went wrong and wasn't fixed. You'll get a decent idea at the end. We suffered through it. We were all working too many hours at terrible pay to be able to actually do anything about it. we adapted. But after about 2 years, it broke. Everyone but me up and moved out for various reasons within a 4-month period. I'm not going to go into any details on my roommates at all because things kind of exploded for a couple of different reasons outside of this. No reason to dig any of that up. I'd been saving up for a while and was able to quit my job without having to immediately get another, so I suddenly had a lot of time. I didn't want to stay and pay the rent by myself or have to find new roommates I could live with, and with my experience in the RHT, I knew I had the landlord by the balls. So I went for them. I stopped paying rent. Annoyingly, I didn't get a summons the first month, but I did the second, so I went. With a meticulously documented plethora of evidence of failure to maintain the property and entering the property without formal notice, I had a copy of the landlord and a copy for the adjudicator. I know from experience that technically you're supposed to give the other party the evidence before the tribunal, but I also knew about that leeway an adjudicator gives to those who represent themselves. So I didn't give the landlord the evidence until our case came up. 100% total ambush. Now they argued that they were ambushed, but the adjudicator just dismissed the case, dressed me down a little, and told me to file my own summons as I should have done. This was the petty revenge. The landlord and lawyer drove 3 hours to get there for nothing. Worse than nothing. I filed my own summons and the big day shows up. It's been about 4 months of me not paying rent at this point. I'm prepared to if I lose, but I don't think I'm going to. The whole thing could not have gone better. I had 20 to 30 pages of evidence and 20 odd photographs. They had nothing. They had no actual defense for our water heater being out for 6 months or us not having a fridge for a year, just to mention 2 severe issues. Their entire defense rested on us being late for rent, which actually worked against them once that led to the adjudicator learning how many times we'd paid the application fee and lies that had no evidence to support them. They even talked over me a few times, and I saw in the adjudicator's eyes the one time I opened my mouth to protest during their turn to speak, but I forced myself to shut up with every gram of willpower I had, so only a squeak came out, and the adjudicator respected me for that. But he had no respect for the landlord. I'd won on every possible front. The only question was how much. It was more than I'd ever seen. I got 9 months of free rent, and the landlord was ordered to have everything fixed before the next month was over, or I'd get more. I gave notice that I was leaving at the end of the 8th month, and I left at the end of the 9th. Because the landlord had never renewed the lease, I didn't have to give him the 3-month notice the lease specified. So if you want to put a figure on it, I basically got a $13,000 judgment in my favour, adjusted for inflation and rounded. I also made the landlord and lawyer drive 3 hours, twice, only to lose. The landlord's face was so red at the end, I thought he'd have a heart attack. He didn't though. Bye, Mark. Well, one thing is for sure, there is nothing worse than a bad landlord. I feel like they're just in a position of ultimate power, and a lot of the time you do hear pretty bad stories of landlords just abusing that power and taking advantage of their tenants in so many different ways. And this one I wasn't really expecting, but this sounds awful. I mean, not having a fridge for a year is crazy. I mean, you add on top of that the fact that you didn't have hot water for 6 months. That's genuinely bordering on inhumane. I will say though that not all landlords are bad, and you do, I think, hear about the bad ones more than you hear about the good ones. I recently moved out of a flat with my mates, and the landlords were pretty good, to be fair. They gave us a decent chunk of our deposit back, what I think was fair, and they were nice and helpful throughout our entire tenancy. But I do think that bad landlords that do stuff like this give the rest of landlords a really bad rep. However, it's great to see that you got a very, very hefty judgment against them. Fair play to you. Steal a parking spot from a disabled person? Pay up, Karen. This is not my story, but my mum's, who is 58 years old. Last week, I went to Costco to run some errands. I have a GI condition, which allows me to park in the disabled parking space. So I start the parking in one of the only spots until I see a van, which also has a disability placard hanging from their mirror. I figured since they have a van, they must have a person in need of a wheelchair inside. So I figured I can walk a few more feet. They deserve this spot more than me. I started backing out of my car when all of a sudden, enter entitled Karen. As I backed out to give the van space to park, a woman in a pristine Cadillac sedan without a disabled parking placard whips in between my car and the van to park in the disabled parking spot. Oh my goodness. Both the driver in that van and I were angry, understandably so, but she was the only one who got out of her car and let the lady have it. I'm usually the pick your own battles type of person, so I backed off. I still watched from a distance. The Karen starts going off on her, probably projecting. I couldn't hear everything that was being said, but I knew no matter what it was, you couldn't defend her actions. I did notice that on her bumper was a Canadian license plate. We live in Florida. This will come into play a little bit later, but at the time I thought it was funny, given the fact that people stereotype Canadians as being overtly friendly, which was the polar opposite of this lady's demeanour. I've got to interject here. There is nothing worse than when you are waiting to park in a spot that somebody else is going out of. You've been queuing, and then as that person leaves, another car jumps the queue and jumps into that spot. Apart from if it's a disabled spot and you're giving it to somebody else who has a disabled sticker, and then someone else who doesn't have a disabled sticker jumps in front of them. I didn't think it could get worse than someone stealing my spot, but that is somehow even worse. Anyway, let's get back to the story. Canada Karen storms off inside to do her shopping or whatever, and the van lady picked up her phone and started calling someone, probably the police. I wanted to tell her that she'd be better off getting an employee because it would take a long time for dispatch to send someone here, since honestly, our PD is usually lazy as heck, and Karen may have gone by then. But very strangely enough, it didn't even take more than 5 minutes for one of the patrol units to show up. Canada Karen didn't even arrive back at her car until a few minutes after the cop was here. This time, I was outside giving the police officer my side of the story, considering that I was a witness. Canada Karen, of course, got into a tiff, and here is how it went. The officer said, "Mom, you do understand that 1, you almost hit these 2 vehicles, and 2, you cannot park in a disabled parking spot if you are not authorized or don't have a placard." Karen replied, "Oh no, you're entirely misreading the situation. These 2 were fighting over the spot, and while they were, I just pulled in. No harm done, right?" Ugh, the gaslighting. No, I said. I was letting her park because she needed the spot more than I did, while I motioned over at van lady's grandson to hopefully give her a hint. He actually had cerebral palsy and is wheelchair bound. Clearly, you don't even look disabled, Karen said. A typical Karen phrase. If she could park here, then why can't I park here too? Mom, I noticed you have Ontario plates, said the officer. How long have you been in the States? Canada Karen then starts sweating bullets. She probably thought he was going to question her legal status or something. Well, you see, I moved in with my husband. He's American, and... Mom, this car is registered to you, not your husband. And you haven't answered my question. How long have you lived here in the States? Oh, about a year. Big mistake. Mom, you understand that according to federal law, any non-US citizen living in the States longer than a 30-day period must register their vehicle within 30 days of entering the country. Correct? If Karen's jaw dropped any lower at that moment, it would have fallen off. I'm afraid I will have to write you up on a $500 fine for inability to register within 30 days of entry, and additionally, a $250 fine for unauthorized parking in a disability parking space. When they handed Canada Karen her ticket, she snatched it out of his hand and stormed back into her car, still angry but now more embarrassed. Before I left the scene to finally go shopping, I went up to van lady and I asked her if she needed any more help. She said she was alright and thanked me. I told her it was amazing how quickly the cops showed up, and then she laid this on me. Apparently, she didn't dial 911. She called her son, who was the police chief of our town, who just so happened to be her grandson's, the boy with cerebral palsy's, father. As a mum who has a son on the spectrum, I know this more than anything. Hell hath no fury like a parent when their child with special needs is mistreated. Once he heard that this crazy lady stole a parking spot from his own son, who needed that spot and wasn't able to defend himself, he immediately had a squad car sent out to hopefully de-escalate the situation, and our police station was just up the road. Luckily, once Karen left with a $750 a-hole tax in tow, van lady and her grandson were able to park in the spot and continue on with their day, and me with mine. Moral of the story, don't create drama if you don't want karma. Oh, that has got a great ring to it. Okay, I'm not even just saying this. Do you guys want to see that on a t-shirt? Don't create drama if you don't want karma. That is class. That is genuinely class. How have I never heard that, right? I've been doing this for over 6 years now. And despite all the thousands of stories that I've read, Not one person has ever said that sentence, I don't think. It's genuinely genius. Draw me a comment. If I did a nice little design, had that on a t-shirt, would some of you like it? I've not actually released any sort of merch or anything for a very, very long time, and if you've been around on the channel for a while, you'll know that some of my stuff, and you've really enjoyed it, has been really popular. If you think back to COVID, I released a face mask that sold genuinely thousands of you guys absolutely loved that one. The profits all went to charity, but you guys absolutely loved it. It sold thousands of copies, I suppose, thousands of masks. I've done Redditor merch in general. I've also done Not Today, Karen, on a jumper before. So, you know, we can do whatever. Do you want a Don't Create Drama If You Don't Want Karma t-shirt? Comment down below. I want one. I might just make it for myself. Genuinely. My ex-mother-in-law sent her church friends to harass my daughters and me. I have now exposed her family to her church community, and she's getting shamed and shunned at church. I am a 46-year-old woman, and my daughters, who are 17 and 15, have a strained relationship with my ex-husband's parents, who are 78 and 80. My ex passed away in an accident last year, and we've had some major family drama since, due to his cheating and him leaving 2 boys born with his affair partner orphaned. She also died. Part of the drama has been my ex-in-laws trying to get custody of my daughters, and them also trying to live with us. First one we're going to court over, the second one will never happen. Where we live, there's a weekend market with fresh produce, eggs, meats, and other products straight from farmers. This week was extra special since it was my youngest birthday. Since her party is later in the month, I decided to give her a budget and set her loose on the market to get whatever she wanted, mostly chocolate and sweets. After an hour, I did start getting worried, and just before I called her, she called me. She was crying, saying some weird people have cornered her. I ran to her with my oldest daughter to find 6 older women berating my daughter for being unchristian, for refusing to spend time with her paternal grandparents, or for wanting to be a, quote, good big sister to her poor orphaned baby brothers. My daughters are the ones that found out about my ex cheating and the babies, so they're not fond of the kids. It's trauma, and they are working with a therapist. I got between the group and my daughter, telling my eldest to go and pay for the stuff that her sister had and to go to the car. Then I turned to the women, some who I knew from when we went to my ex-in-law's church, and I ripped them a new one. They told me I was worse for refusing to obey my ex-in-laws like a good Christian wife. Eventually the screaming turned too loud and we were all asked to leave the market. I met with my girls in the car, the women following me like a group of vultures. I managed to get in the car and I drove away. After my girls went to bed, I got online to talk to another member of that church that I'm on good terms with. I told him about what happened, and after he apologized, he told me just what was going on. My ex-mother-in-law posted this massive story in the church's Facebook group about how horrible my daughters and I are, how we are leaving them homeless and penniless. They inherited my ex's personal bank account and his life insurance, and how my daughters don't even talk to them. She also accused us of being the reasons she lost her grandsons. The boys are now living with distant relatives of my ex-husband. Basically, it was a sob story worthy of a Hallmark movie, and of course, they were getting all the love and support from the more extremist members of their church. This church and its members are a bit annoying, especially with LGBTQ+ topics, but they have a small saving grace. They're incredibly strict about cheating. It's a big no-no, be it from a husband or a wife equally. Now, how did she get around blaming me about affair children without exposing the cheating? She claimed the other woman was our surrogate since I was unable to have more children. Then said I didn't want the babies because they were boys, which is an absolutely disgusting thing to be accused of. Well, I decided it was time to clean up this mess, and since I was mid-divorce when my ex died, I had all the evidence I needed. And since the divorce wasn't completed, I don't have any legal ramification for releasing all the evidence. I was off the next day, and I went to a print shop to get copies of all the delightful pictures of my ex cheating. His text conversations with his affair partner, the ones with his parents confessing to his cheating and getting support from them, my ex-in-laws harassing me about the divorce, and my coup de grace, all the emails and text messages of them bullying my daughters about their baby brothers. In one of them, they call my daughters, insert swear word here, Basically, the word you use if you are born out of wedlock, I can't say it on YouTube though, telling them it was their fault their father died since they told me about the affair and I began the divorce. This one was literally 2 days after he died. I paid extra for all of this to be printed in beautiful, high-quality paper. Then, when I got home, I sat down for hours to make delightfully personalised binders. They looked like the little prayer song packets the church give for everyone to take to sing hymns. The first picture when opening the binders is my ex and his side woman making out in our living room. Their faces are easy to discern, and the girl looks nothing like me. Different skin tone, hair colour. Underneath, I wrote ex-husband's name and affair girl's name, love story. I took them to the church before service. There's a desk in the back with the songbooks for people that need/forget their own, and they never checked them. The gossip mill was quick and harsh. The names my ex and his affair partner got called in the Facebook group were so bad that the pastor himself had to get involved just to keep things relatively PG. People were angry at my ex-in-laws for their abuse to my daughters, but what made me laugh was that I was still in the wrong for the divorce. But, quote, it is understandable that I failed on my duties after the shock, and I possibly will one day return to the light, unlike my cheating husband and his Jezebel. They actually used another word that I can't use here, I imagine. I got 2 apology letters in the mail for my girl and an invitation to join the church for support. As for my ex-in-laws, they got shamed into leaving the church. My ex-mother-in-law made a post on her wall about how alienated she feels and how no one cares for the elderly anymore. How she wished her great son was still alive since he would have taken care of her and her husband. With what money, I don't know, since I was the breadwinner. And there we go, that is the end of that story. Before I give my thoughts, finally OP has added this, a quick explanation on the will. My ex-husband had a will that named his parents as beneficiaries. As far as I was aware, he had told me he had named our daughters, not them. I never pushed for me to be the beneficiary, as my own will has my daughters as the beneficiaries and not him. So yeah, there we go. That is it for the story, and that will and the explanation makes complete sense to me. I'm not sure about having your parents as beneficiaries, but that's up to your ex-husband, and everyone's will is different. That's very fair enough. The thing that's crazy to me is that your ex-husband's parents, at the ages of 78 and 80, are still so, active. It's not as if they've sort of chilled out in their old age and they're living their life. They're, I assume, retired now, just happily going to church, and yeah, maybe the stresses of life have passed them by this point. No, they are as active and sort of crazy as ever. As I'm saying this, I am remembering the fact that, of course, their son has recently passed away. However, I don't think that is an excuse for them to act like this and potentially ruin your life and start some weird online sort of cult against you from the church. It's very, very odd behavior. I get it a little bit given what's happened, but not to this extent. I mean, having 6 women attack your daughter in public is actually ridiculous. Like, that's bordering on potentially illegal. But there we go. I'm thankful that in the end, the truth came out. But for a while there, I was very worried about your safety and that of your children. A guy left me stranded on a first date. I am a 19-year-old woman, and I went on a date with a guy who was also 19 for the first time. It was a beautiful day where we lived, so he took me to this nature park and we went on a walk. We talked about our lives, and I honestly thought it was going really well. After the walk, he said he needed to use the bathroom. I did too, so he drove to the nearest store where we could pee, which was a Best Buy. I went to the bathroom and he did too. When I came out, I waited. I waited, and I waited for him to come out. Finally, I got worried and I texted him. The message didn't go through, but I gave him the benefit of the doubt and assumed his phone died. I then got tired of waiting and went to check to see if his car was still in the parking lot. Sure enough, it wasn't. I went back inside and asked the person at the front if they saw a man, I gave his description, leave the store. They said they saw him run out of the store in a hurry a bit ago. So he left me, stranded, at a freaking Best Buy 20 minutes from my house. I Uber home and I'm fuming. So I decided to find his family members on social media and tell them what he did. I eventually found who I think to be his sister, and I told her the whole story. She ensured I would get my things back as some was still in his car, and even offered to reimburse me for the Uber. Some of you may think I'm crazy, but when one goes low, I go lower. I got my things back, and they were clearly thrown in my yard out of his window. Someone was mad. Their family now knows what a POS they are. And unbelievably, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can see on screen right now OP's front lawn with a picture of the stuff that's been thrown, I assume, by this guy onto her lawn. I mean, it's ridiculous. I'm not quite sure what we've got there. Some sort of coffee mug, maybe a jumper or something as well behind it, with the caption, clearly he just threw it outside his window. OP has left a little edit on this. For those who care for an update, surprise, there isn't one. He blocked me on everything, and I don't even want to talk to him again, nor do I care to hear his sorry excuse. And for those who are blaming me, go frick yourself. I'm not leaving out any details. If I was, I probably would have just dropped the whole thing and forgotten about my things, because it's not like it was anything majorly important. But since he wanted to be a jerk, yeah, I'm gonna inconvenience you and make your behavior known. I was nice, attentive, and respectful the whole date. I look like my photos, I dress nicely, and I have good hygiene. And regardless of any of that, the only excuse to just ditching someone at a store in the middle of a date is if they are being verbally or physically abusive. Other than that, I should have at least received a ride home. No other excuses would really suffice. If you offer to take me out, take me home too. Period. All I can say after reading that is what a jerk. I mean, the good news for you, at least, OP, is now you know that he is a terrible person and you're never going to see him again. But goodness me, as you said, the least you can do is just say, you know what, I'm not really having a great time here. I'm not feeling the vibe. I'm just going to drive you home. And yeah, it's been nice to get to know you, but that's it. But doing this is a genuine disgrace. And I am happy that his sister knows about this. If I did this on some of the dates that I've been on, and my sister found out, she'd be like, what are you doing? That is not how you treat anyone, let alone someone you've just met. And, you know, they've put a lot of trust in you. They've got in your car, you're a stranger, etc., etc. And you just leave them stranded at a Best Buy 20 minutes from their house. It's despicable behavior. So you did the exact right thing. And I'm glad now that his family know about him. You can tell he wasn't happy, though, the fact that he just threw your stuff on the lawn out of his car window. What a jerk. Now for our next story of revenge. My mate got revenge for my mum. This happened in the early 1990s. My mum bought a convenience store from a con man. He convinced her that he had cancer and only months to live, and my mum fell for it, paying way too soon and way over the odds, about double what the shop was worth. The guy had cooked his books and showered her fake tax returns, showing the shop had a certain turnover when it was actually running at about 30% of that claim. She struggled on for 3 or 4 years, but had to pack it in and sold for a big loss. Last year, she told me that when she sold the shop, a mate of mine got revenge for her. Let's call him Bart, whom I've known since we were both 4 years old, and who of course she knew well. At the time of all of this shop business, I was living overseas. Anyways, once the shop was gone and mum had moved away, Bart started a relationship with the con man, pretending to work up a relationship in case he wanted to sell. Of course, the con man never had cancer, the idiot. After a few years, the con man decided to sell and downsize as his kids had grown up, giving Bart the contract to sell on his behalf. Bart now had access to the con man's house. Taking a look around after an open house, he found a sealed box in the crawl space in his ceiling. It weighed a ton. He cut open the bottom flap so he could reseal it, and he took a look inside. He reckoned there was over 2 kilograms in gold bars. Over the following week, he had lead bars made up by a bloke who made his own fishing sinkers, and then came the switcheroo. But he was clever. He left the top layer of gold in place. The house sold and the con man moved out 3 months later. There's never been mention of the missing gold. Bart sold the gold and gave the contributions to my mother, whom Bart swore to secrecy, even from me, but she finally spilt the beans to me last year. It was about $35,000 Australian, well short of all she had lost, but it made a massive difference to her life at that time. Well, there we go. Bart is definitely a friend for life. What a good lad. Back in the day when I used to watch The Simpsons, I was always a big fan of Bart Simpson. So now anyone called Bart just automatically has a soft spot in my heart. So respect for continuing on the legacy of Bart being a great name and a great bloke. Well done, that man. To be honest, he's just a great guy, isn't he? It's almost like your mum now has another son looking over her and just making sure she's alright. That took a lot of effort, by the way, I'm sure, to procure that relationship over I don't know how many years. just hoping that one day this con man was willing to sell his property or move on, or just trying to get as much trust in that relationship as Bart could to then eventually do this. I mean, it didn't have to be the fact that he found 2 kilograms of gold bars. He could have done anything at this point. Like, the house was in his hands. But yeah, doing what he did, and I know it wasn't the same amount of money that OP's mum lost by selling the business for much less than she bought it from the con man for, but still, 35,000 Australian dollars stolen is pretty elite. Yeah, it's illegal, but in this situation, I think it's fine. Okay, now the moment you've all been waiting for, let's get into the third revenge story of this episode, the juiciest of all three. Now for our final revenge story. Short me $70,000 in violation of our agreement. It'll cost you $1.8 million. Disclaimer. The names and some of the situations have been changed to protect identities, but the dollars and general nature of the situation is completely true. Background. A year out of school in the early 1990s, I procured a job as a business analyst for a large family-owned tech company. This business was located in the booming heart of technology at the time and was very profitable. As tech took off over the next decade, the company thrived and remained family-owned. What was a rich family and company became exceedingly wealthy, with a valuation/net worth in the high 9/low 10 figures. The family that owned it was quite neurotic, very moody, and had a reputation as very ruthless or greedy when it came to financing, deal-making, employees, etc. I truly believe this is what held them back from ultimately becoming a household name as a company. As I progressed in the company, I gained more and more face time with the owners. I worked on some projects directly with ownership that really paid off and gained me even greater access to their inner circle. Now, like a lot of people at the time, and particularly those who worked in tech, I was heavily invested in tech stocks. I discussed some of my investments and gains with ownership as casual conversation, though investing had nothing to do with my role in the company. That is, until one day in late 1999, when the owner came to me and asked me if I would invest some of his personal money. He wanted me to take big risks and see if they would pay off using $1 million of his personal money. I was a bit hesitant, but still being in my late 20s and wanting to prove myself, I said I would. I asked for a written agreement where they acknowledged this wasn't my role in the company, was a personal matter between the owner and me, and to document my compensation for this side arrangement, 20% of all profits. Around this same time, and by working in the industry, I started to notice the weakness associated with a lot of tech companies. They just weren't living up to their hype and stock price, and some seemed like they were starting to run out of money. I had no inside information, just a strong sense of which companies were struggling based on my work in the business. Based on this sense, I started using both my money and the owner's money to short tech companies just after the new year in 2000. For anyone unfamiliar with shorting, it means if the value of a stock decreases, the value of the investment increases. I had a few long positions, but my overall position was very short, pretty much betting against the stock market, or at least against these tech companies. Since the owner wanted big risk and big reward, I used his money and obtained leverage or margin from the financial institution where I maintained both his and my trading accounts. The accounts were separate, but both under my name. Again, I documented this and gained consent. Well, both my account and his suffered some moderate losses in the first 2 months of 2000 before the bubble began to burst, and both accounts, but his in particular, began to skyrocket. In June, the company began to suffer a downturn. We were still profitable, but since we provided tech services and products, we were not immune to weakness in the broader market. I'd not informed the owner of my short strategy. He came to me one day and asked how his money was doing, saying he suspected it was way down like the general market. To his surprise, I informed him that while we still had some money tied up in options, puts, and shorts, but based on the positions I had closed, there was $1.35 million in cash sitting in the account that belonged to him. Again, I still had a bunch of open positions, which, if memory serves, were worth about $1 million on that day, but the positions I had closed had yielded $1.35 million in cash just sitting in his account, which was in my name. The owner, either through ignorance or lack of attention, said, "Great, $1.35 million. Fantastic work in this down market. Will you please wire it to me?" I responded that I would, But of course, I'd be taking my 20% of the $350,000 profit, or $70,000, before wiring him $280,000. I also reminded him I still had open positions that had yet to pay off or close, but I didn't state the amount. He once again appeared not to understand or comprehend the open position statement, but instead totally focused on and became incensed about my rightful claim for $70,000. He went on and on about how times were tough, I should be grateful for a job, particularly at my young age, and the entire $350,000 was necessary for him and the company. I knew this wasn't true, based on my position within the company. Worse, this was my first time personally experiencing the greedy and corrupt nature that served as the basis for ownership's reputation. So, the revenge. Since after 2 separate conversations, the owner didn't seem to grasp that the open positions would yield at least some income and thus additional profit, I decided not to mention it again. I sent him back the entire $1.35 million, and I continued to manage the open positions to the best of my ability. And here's the kicker, the owner never brought it up again. He seemed to think the $1.35 million payment was the entire value of the account and never understood or remembered that open positions still existed. He never asked for records, tax documents, or any time of audit or financials. Given the fact that he was dishonest with me, I actually didn't feel the need to disabuse him of that notion. Ultimately, after a bit more net gain, I covered all the shorts and I exercised all of the options, puts in this case, for an additional $1.8 million. I worked for the company for 3 more years, and the owner never asked about it during my tenure, after I gave notice, or since. I know it's a bit crass and even shady, but given his dishonesty with me over the $70K, I felt justified in keeping the additional $1.8 million. I paid taxes on the gain, long-term capital gain, and went on my way with a fantastic nest egg. Nobody has asked about it since, and I've only told the story to a few people, and even then only after the statute of limitations passed. The final ironic cherry on top of this sundae is that during my remaining 3 years, I gained greater influence with ownership in position within the company because they considered me loyal for giving the $1.35 million back and not making too much of a stink about the $70,000 profit. Little did they know, I got the better of them. The company eventually folded due to family disputes, but my understanding is that ownership walked away in very good financial position. They likely could have been a much better and greater company had they not practiced the same dishonesty that they showed me with their vendors, clients, and employees. Thanks for reading, and hope you enjoyed. Now, as I mentioned in the intro, there are a couple of short updates of this one, as this was actually posted quite a few years ago now. So let's first start with the update from 2023. There have been no negative consequences from the below, and no overall consequences, other than a few people DMing me with incorrect guesses. In fact, the remaining family members have reached out a time or two about some consulting work. They have no clue. And then, just 37 minutes ago at the time of recording, and that is why I wanted to include this story, we got this update from 2025. Quick, ironic update. There have still been no negative consequences for me. In fact, the older generation from the original company has retired or died, and the younger generation, around my age, have taken over their business lines. And, though I have my own business, we've begun working together on projects again. They obviously have no clue about the original 1.8 million, which now occurred approximately 20 years ago. Okay, there we go. Great story. I really enjoyed that. I can't quite believe that a family that has so much success, right? They've built a business that what you said was in the high 9, low 10 figures. I mean, that's insane. Low 10 figures is $1 billion. I can't quite believe that they didn't know that much about stocks, options, or didn't even ask to see the account at any point during you trading with one of the ownership's money. I mean, that's just insane to me. I suppose maybe the answer is in the fact that the company is worth so much money and these guys are worth so much money, they don't care about as little as $1.8 million or whatever. And they probably were like, oh yeah, I put in $1 million, I've got 1.3 back, that's fine, I don't care anymore about that, I don't even need to see anything, it's not worth my time. But still, the fact that they didn't ask more about, what was the rate of return, which stocks did particularly well, oh, how come you thought about shorting, etc. Just obvious questions. It's strange, isn't it? I mean, it is also just diabolical that you've not only made a lot of money for this individual, but then he's been like, oh yeah, well done, man. I'm going to keep it all. And that's it. Despite the fact that the business is worth so much money in the first place. I mean, that's absolutely ridiculous. But again, as I said in the introduction, this is definitely illegal. But once again, like the second story, you let me know in the comments down below, guys. Do you think this was legit? If you don't ask, you don't get. And this person clearly forgot, and now you're past the statute of limitations, and it's likely, as you said, that nobody else in the company knows. It's been 20 years. I think it's probably past the point of no return. His abuse led to my mum's death, so I took his house. So let's get this out of the way. I am a 34-year-old woman. My mum was 55, and my now ex-stepdad is 65. They co-own the home as joint tenants, and everything they had together was 50-50 at this point and time. Let's call my ex-stepfather Larry. So, my mum and Larry have been married for 16, 17 years. There's always been questionable behaviour, but it's none of my business, as I moved out at 18. Well, at 27, I decided I wanted to go to college to better myself. My mum and Larry both agreed and offered me and my small family the basement apartment of their home. 1.5 years into my program, my mum was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. Now, a week before she was due to have surgery to remove the tumours, one of the big ones ruptured. One thing led to another, and my mum's cancer spread. She gets re-diagnosed with different cancer. It's rare, and it's in the connective tissue. She gets given a 2-year estimate without treatments. Now, this is where Larry starts becoming abusive. He's at this appointment with my mum and has a full-blown tantrum. Notes: I have my mum's medical notes and a doctor who noted all of this. This is important for later. He says that, quotes, his wife won't be doing anything. He storms out of the room, and my mum then tells this doctor, who also put this in the medical note, that she, quote, fears for her life because she knows if she doesn't do the treatments, she will die, but she also knows that Larry won't let her. Larry becomes abusive. He starts becoming verbally, mentally, and physically abusive. He drained their joint bank account so my mum couldn't even buy herself bread, cut the brake lines on her car, and more, and did everything in his power to stop her from doing treatments. Let's say she had treatments twice a week, every week. She'd maybe be able to get to half of those if my spouse or myself drove her. My mum ended up moving into my unit in the basement, and I started defending my mum against Larry. I told him, quote, if he didn't stop, I'd be doing everything in my power to ensure that he is held responsible for her death. He proceeded to laugh at me and told me, quote, I'm a woman, what can I do to him? His abuse then extended towards me at pretty much any chance he got. Well, I hired my mum a lawyer and changed my program to criminal law as quickly as I could, so I could learn everything I could with how the system works. I then handed in evidence and we started to build a case. It took 8 months of collecting evidence through security cameras I set up in the home. Now, Larry knew of these cameras. I had nothing, and he was aware he was on camera in certain areas of the home. During this time, I had already been pre-approved by the bank to purchase his 50% of the house. All he had to do was sign one piece of paper and agree, and within 30 days, he could have gotten $250,000. He refused because, quote, I wasn't going to get his house, when he was going to put my whole family on the street. And yes, this was all caught on camera. Larry was handed a summons by my lawyer's office to attend court with us. Well, he refused. He said he knew more than the lawyers and wasn't going to show. Because of this, we ended up winning in court and sole possession of the home was given to my mother. All his assets are locked and put under my mum's supervision to prevent him from liquidating them. He has a restraining order on him from the house and my mum, and he isn't allowed to leave Canada. He was evicted by the police that night and locks were changed, etc. With him being out of the home, we got my mum onto ODSP. And she was able to finally and safely start treatments because she now had access to the transportation offers through ODSP and the cancer societies. ODSP stands for the Ontario Disability Support Program, apparently. My lawyer and her also broke the joint tenancy on the home and became tenants in common. This is also super important, and pretty much while my mum was still lucid, set everything so that when/if she did pass, the house and everything she owned would come to me. For those who don't know, in Canada, you have two options when buying a house. Joint tenants are for married couples who want to split a home 50-50. In these situations, if one passes, the home automatically goes to the spouse. Tenants in common is when you can say buy a house with more than one other party and everyone owns their equity separately. In the event of a death, they go by the will, and that equity can be transferred to whoever is listed. Google for more details. In the next 2 years, before my mum eventually lost her fight to cancer, we kept going to court with Larry. He kept refusing to deal or even sign divorce papers, not taking offers, etc. I became my mum's caregiver and was the one who cared for her in every aspect. Closer to the end, Larry told not only my lawyer, but also the judge in a court settlement meeting that he, quote, refuses to sign or deal with anything else. He would also not attend any more meetings because he would wait for my mum to die and take everything. He was told then in court by the judge and lawyers, 2 of them, that wouldn't happen. He laughed, and yeah, that was the last anyone has heard from Larry. My mum passed away this year. Not due to cancer, but due to a complication from the cancer. She had a tumour rupture and it caused an upper gastro bleed. She died in my arms. There was nothing I could do for her. I was diagnosed with PTSD from the traumatic event. This is also important, and I still somehow managed to handle everything. Larry has changed all his contacts and hasn't updated the courts on his whereabouts. After she passed, my mum's lawyer took her will and we went through the probate court system. Since my mum had been granted sole possession, and as per her will and the videos that my lawyer and the judges had all set up prior to her passing, everything was to be transferred to me. I had to sign some paperwork with the judges, just agreeing to everything that had been set up, but it was all done legally and properly. I also took all of my mum's medical notes, including that note from the original doctor that spoke about Larry's outburst and my mum's fears. Unfortunately, both my lawyer and the judge said they can't hold him responsible for her death, but they all do agree that his actions did lead to her death. I'm still in court as we speak to try and push this through to have him criminally held responsible. I know it's a long shot, but I'm still trying. My lawyer is saying it's like a 60-40 chance, but she's seeing what she can do based on the evidence and confessions we have from him. There's a chance, but it's slim. The home and everything she owned got transferred to me, so I am now the registered owner of the house with sole physical possession. I've also been granted her life insurance, which all went to paying off her debt, including their joint line of credit card, etc. And pretty much everything he thought he'd be getting by waiting for her to die was given to me and approved by the judge. I have agreed with the courts, because I'm not a bad person, that I will honour the 50% buyout that was agreed upon when we started this whole fight. However, any debt he owes me, because he still owns the 50% in equity only, will be deducted from the buyout balance. We will also not be getting the house reappraised because of the renovations this house needs that I will be paying for. He now owes me over $50,000 in debt, which is climbing based on any renovations I do to the home during my ownership, paying off the joint mortgage and paying off the joint line of credit. My lawyers also want to go for 50% of all legal fees and 50% of anything I lose due to my PTSD diagnosis from all of this. But they need to find him first. Now, since no one can contact Larry, my province here in Canada only has a 2-year statutory limit for having claims open in courts. The claim he opened to get the house back has been thrown out in the court system, saying that he has abandoned claim and title. I showed up in court, but he did not. After some internet digging, my friend has found that Larry has taken off to Mexico and is not even in Canada anymore, which also violates the court order that was placed on him when he was evicted from the home. He was not to leave Canada until things were settled, so that's a whole different story there, and my lawyer is handling that part because that has nothing to do with me. But until he returns, the courts are not worried about really anything. Now, in the event he doesn't return, and let's just say he dies in Mexico, my lawyer and the judge have advised me we will use his estates with the court for the 50% equity to be transferred to me in collateral to the debt that is owed. However, I still own the house, I have sole possession, and in all legal aspects, the house belongs to me. If he does come back, he will be facing repercussions for leaving Canada, but if he does try and reopen another claim, he can't. Since the claim was set as abandoned, my lawyer is saying he can't open another one. So he'll be stuck either A, taking the offer, or B, not taking it, and I just do what I wrote above and petition his estate and the courts. But either way, in any situation, he will not be getting back possession of the home. So, yeah. At this point, I'm still going to court to have him held legally responsible. The courts and lawyers are all on my side, and they were the ones who granted me the house and everything. So I legally took everything from him because his actions led to my mum's delay in getting treatments and thus killed my mum. Well, there you go. That is justice personified. I love the fact that you're going to continue to work on this seemingly until this guy suffers. Like, who knows what might have happened? If there weren't those delays in treatment, your mum may well still be with us. In fact, it's actually quite likely that she could be, which is a horrible thought to have. And I can't believe this guy got away with what he did, but yeah, there has to be justice. Hopefully, this is going to be over pretty soon. It seems like you've had an extremely rough few years, but yeah, I don't know where this guy is, what's going to happen, but at least the courts are all on your side, and it seems as if everyone that is involved in this, from a legal standpoint, is backing you. And no matter what really happens next, I mean, say your ex-stepdad comes back, say he doesn't, you know, if you never see him again, I think you'll still be all right based on what I've just read there. So yeah, I mean, you've been through such a hard period. I hope it's going to get easier now, but again, let's see what happens. Okay, a pretty hard-hitting first story in this episode. Let's lighten things up a little bit with this second. Rejected a popular guy who hit on me as a joke. I was the weird goth girl in high school. I owned it. Doesn't bother me at all. Honestly, I see why I was a target for this. So, sophomore year of high school, I get a text from a guy. How he got my number is still a mystery to me, but it gives me the ick. Who was a football player and therefore pretty popular by default. He was very much sliding into my DMs, as we would call it now, but this was 2007, so we still flirted via text. He started off by making me guess who he was, which was super weird and an instant red flag. After a lot of back and forth, him being all flirty, he finally told me. I was like, what the heck? I hadn't said 2 words to this guy since the 7th grade. Total cold call. But then he just starts your general, oh, I think you're really cute, etc. Then, after a polite but not very assertive decline, the messages start to get more graphic. Thankfully, I was spared any pics. He drops the bomb that we should hook up and keeps trying to entice me into coming over. Now, I was your typical goth kid who was very anti-conformist, admittedly to a cringy degree, which included wanting nothing to do with jocks. I got super angry that he was hitting on me at all, especially since he was being super gross about it. So, temper got the best of me, and basically, I tore him a new one and said things like, "You're gross, why would I want anything to do with you?" Just generally started roasting the heck out of him for something along the lines of being an unoriginal, pathetic jock who was going to peak in high school. He didn't take this well. Not because he actually liked me and was hurt, but apparently because this was all meant to be a joke, where the text would have been spread around the school to embarrass me. He allegedly had multiple friends over that were in on this at the time. They were also trying to lure me over to his house to collectively laugh at me. As a couple of commenters have pointed out, there may have been even more nefarious plans, and I could have ended up being assaulted, for all I know, had I gone over. If you'd known them, you'd agree these guys were definitely the type, oh goodness. Basically, his plan backfired in the worst possible way though. To make matters worse for him, his friends started laughing at him and then leaked the text, saying he was clearly a loser because he just got rejected by the school weirdo. This was perpetuated even further by my friends because they were so mad at what he was trying to do to me. They spread that stuff to anyone who would listen. As you can see, in the end, the revenge was done unintentionally on my end, and then continued by his own friends, plus mine, from there on out. Seriously, I don't know how you recover from getting rejected by high school me. RIP your reputation, my guy. Thanks for reading. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. OP's left a quick edit on the end here saying, to anyone who thinks I'm toxic because of my reaction, I'll make it clear, I did tell him multiple times before it got graphic that I don't do the dating thing while in high school, which was 100% true. The gross texts were just my breaking point. He crossed a boundary I'd made clear, and he was being disrespectful, even if he had genuinely liked me. Thank you and good night. And also, people have been asking if he actually did peak in high school. I don't know much about what's going on in his life because his Facebook is private, but I can tell you, he's 32 with a massive receding hairline, and he's really let himself go. A receding hairline, you say? Well, how embarrassing is that? That could never be me. It's definitely not one of the reasons why I'm wearing a hat. Just shut up, you. Don't make any comments. I can see you. You're going down to the comments. Leave me alone. I mean, actually, you guys tell me. Fuck you, I've put that hat back on. I mean, actually, you guys tell me. Fuck you, I've put that hat back on. Okay, if I'm going to take my hat off, at least let me do my hair. But talking about the actual story now, I mean, we all know people like this, and we knew people like this at school. They're just terrible, right? Because they're cool and they're playing the football team, everyone likes them. But in reality, like when they leave school, they realize they were just jerks. I mean, some of them do anyway. But yeah, I mean, like just doing this sort of stuff to bully someone that is less popular than you is just so poor. And I mean, that comment about the assault, I wouldn't jump to that conclusion, but we've seen it, right? We've seen it in schools before. That sort of thing can happen with popular kids. So yeah, I don't think that is too ridiculous to say. And you're right. You've got to be careful with these sort of people. As for the revenge itself, I know you didn't necessarily mean it, but well done. I mean, like, you stuck to your guns is the main thing. And yeah, fair play to you. You were probably a bit at the start like, oh my God, I'm getting attention from this really popular guy. This is really cool. But no, you still stuck to your principles and were like, okay, I've said I'm not doing the dating thing in school. Why are you sending me this graphic stuff? That's disgusting. I don't care who you are. And, you know, doing that and yeah, maintaining your sort of your rules in your head and saying, yeah, this can be this person, but it doesn't really matter, has actually stopped you from being embarrassed, I suppose, and in the end has actually embarrassed him. So well done. If that's not a moral of sticking to your principles, I don't know what is. Being the worst boss ever does not pay off. In the year 2003, the company I was working for closed down, so I sought out new employment. I was a machinist by trade with a great reputation, so it took me less than a day to get a job. We will call the new place Spiral because of the specialized tools they made. Anyway, I started out as one of the operators. The place was owner operated, meaning the owner was there daily. He had a floor supervisor that was actually pretty nice. After I'd been there around a year, the owner and super had a falling out, and the super left. For whatever reason, the owner, we should call him Dan, told me that I was in charge. A little backstory on Dan. He was in his 60s and had started the company out of his garage. He ended up buying a huge chunk of land and turned it into an industrial park, all while in his 20s. By now, he was one of the richest guys in the state. He was also the biggest jerk I had ever met. He treated every employee like garbage, except for me and one other guy. If we dared to talk to each other during work hours, he would scream at us. My promotion kind of financially trapped me. Dan would have no problems talking to me though, and he was the braggy sort of rich guy, while paying us the bare minimum. During our talks, I learned that he cooked his books. You see, the industrial park was owned by an entity that he created, while Spiral was owned by another. He would always make sure that the park entity charged Spiral enough in rent that it looked like the company was barely staying afloat. He also bragged that he'd taken a bunch of industrial waste and buried it on his property at home because it cost so much less. He made my life hell over the next decade, always keeping my pay just high enough that I couldn't afford to leave, while treating me and my guys like trash. I ended up with a 95% turnover rate on employees. I'm not exaggerating. 95% turnover rate. So 19 out of 20 of your employees left. That's mental. We ended up having to go to temp agencies, and towards the end, even they refused to send me people. Wow. I had to do some careful wording, but my duties ended up swelling to the point where I convinced Dan to let me say I was the plant manager. This right here was huge. I have no degree from college, but I now had a title and the experience. I started to look for a job in earnest, and after 6 months, I found one for a lot more money, with benefits. Yeah, Spiral had none. Now, over my time at Spiral, I had seen everyone that gave them notice be told to leave on the spot, and the company that hired me insisted I give them the 2-week notice. So I said I would, but I didn't. At the end of my last day, I sat at my desk and sent an email to the head of OSHA and the state's EPA office, 2 men that I'd gotten to know well. I filled them in on all the violations that Dan had disclosed. I also sent an email to the state's attorney about the books. I left my keys on my desk with a paper under them that simply read, "I quit." I never found out if the state's attorney went anywhere, but the contact at OSHA let me know the company ended up with $150,000 in fines for some willful violations, and the guy from the EPA dug up half of Dan's property before he admitted to where he buried the waste. Last I knew, he ended up in jail. Now, interestingly enough, OP actually said at the top of this one that they originally shared it in Petty Revenge, but they were told they should post it in Nuclear Revenge instead. And yeah, this is not Petty Revenge at all. I think you got the wrong subreddit there. I mean, $150,000 in fines is not petty. That is pretty serious. Can't quite get over that turnover rate in employees though. I mean, 19 out of 20 roughly employees leave. You just know that it's probably not the best working environment when that is going on. Goodness me. Okay, now we're shifting things up and moving over to a different subreddit. So these stories probably aren't as nuclear, but don't worry. They're revenge stories, and that is the name of the subreddit nonetheless. I blackmailed the maintenance man at my grandma's senior centre. Hi, I am a 41-year-old woman. I had to do some community service for a misdemeanor charge I was found guilty of, so I went to the senior centre in my town. Immediately upon arriving and being introduced to the person in charge, aka the maintenance man, he was hitting on me. We did no work at all. We walked straight through the cafeteria and out the back door and sat on a bench where he proceeded to tell me how awful his life was, how he was in a loveless marriage, his wife was handicapped, on and on. I felt bad for him until he started talking about the other girls that came through. They sent him pics and he signed their paperwork to say they did their community service. Maybe I wanted to do the same? I don't remember what I said, but I left and didn't go back, pretending it didn't happen. Then I only had a week left in my sentence to have my community service done, and I didn't do any of it. I had 4 out of 40 completed, so I did the only thing I could think of. I texted the maintenance man and told him I wasn't going to send him nudes, but he was going to sign my paperwork, or I would tell his boss and the court what he was doing. So he signed it. Then I told my probation officer not to use them anymore and why. I wanted to call his boss, but never did. I just wanted to make sure that he wasn't taking advantage of the women in that program anymore. Just to clear things up, he is no longer part of the program because I did turn him in the same day I blackmailed him. I regret not doing it sooner, and I regret not telling his employer and his wife. Funny ending to this one is one day I was at work telling some girls about this guy, and later on that day, one of them pulled me aside and told me that the maintenance man is her stepdad. She started crying, saying she knew he was doing this to her mum, but her mum won't believe her, and maybe now she will. I felt terrible for her. I told her to have her mum call me and I would tell her all of it, but I never heard anything, and as far as I know, they're still together, and he still works there. Which sucks, because now I'm 50 and can go there, and it's awesome. The craft room is insane. They have a choir, lots of exercise equipment, free transportation, and day trips everywhere, but I don't want to see him. If I had the balls, I would totally go and make sure I said, hey, remember me? Oh god, what a horrible person. I mean, just what a horrible person. I really wish that, like, you know, this isn't, as I said, this isn't from Nuclear Revenge. This is just from r/revenge stories. And this is one of those stories where I wish the revenge was nuclear. Like, the fact that that guy is still working there now is ridiculous. I feel like this is one of those where you need to find out and get in contact with other women that this has happened to. I don't know how you would, but maybe, you know, talk to some other staff at this location and sort of explain what's going on and what this guy has done to you and other women, and maybe they'll have the contact details of others that have worked there before. I mean, they should, right? They should have the community service details. Whatever. Like, you need to do something about this because this guy is just taking advantage of you. And I sort of get it. Like, if you're someone that has to do community service and this guy's, you know, exploiting you, sure, but like offering you a decent deal, you can do this and get off completely. Don't know, I can't like really blame any of these girls for doing this. It's just so, like, yeah, as I said, exploitative and manipulative and just disgusting. Just very, very gross. This is what I say, like, sometimes is violence the answer? I don't know. This guy's got away with it completely, in my opinion. Yeah, there was a little bit of revenge, but barely any. I mean, look, fair play to you for actually getting him to stop and not take advantage of women, but is that revenge? Getting someone to stop what they were doing? Not really. Like, where's the revenge there? They've just stopped. It's a shame. I wanted more there. Now for our final revenge story of this one. A lousy friend. This is about my ex-friend Ivy. We grew up together, did everything side by side, and had each other's backs always. About 5 years ago, I really needed her the most, as I was in a really rough period. I lost my job, and not long after, my boyfriend broke up with me. I needed a place to stay for a while as I figured things out. Ivy, who more times than I can count I'd given a place to stay when she was struggling and when she was going through breakups, couldn't help me this one time I needed her. She just said, "Look, I wish I could help, but things are tight." All I needed was a place to stay. I'd pay for everything else I was going to need or use. I managed it somehow with the help of another friend. I found another job and I was doing okay again. Now, fast forward a couple of years and I was doing better than ever. Great job, my own place, a solid life. Then, out of nowhere, and after years of no communication, Ivy showed up at my door. Guess what? She needed a place to stay for a few weeks since she was down on her luck. I just looked at her, thought about all the times I'd been there for her and all the times she wasn't there for me. Then I smiled and said exactly what she said to me. "I wish I could help, but things are tight." It wasn't something huge, but it felt great. Revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just letting people feel the loneliness and absence they once left you with. And there we go. That probably is the moral of the story right there. Look, we started with some nuclear revenge in today's episode, ended with some more minor stuff. But yeah, I agree. This is just karma personified. And I think that you're right. It doesn't have to be loud. Revenge doesn't have to be grandiose, crazy, even nuclear. Sometimes it's better to just send a message with something like this. In this case, it's a literal message just saying, "You know what? No, you did this to me. I'm doing this to you. How do you like it?" But other times I do feel like, yeah, maybe it's better to go a little bit more overboard just for the fun of it. This time it wasn't one of those occasions. And I think what you did was perfect. It would have been nice, I think, as well to just, and maybe she did infer this from what you said or the tone of what you said, but you know, you're doing well and you have your own place and you probably, well, definitely could have taken her in once again. I mean, if you took her in before when things were worse for you, you can definitely take her in now. I hope she knows that. I hope she knows that things aren't tight for you, that you're doing well and that you were saying that sarcastically, because yeah, that's when it would hit the hardest if you're like, "Oh God, this is because I said what I said and didn't take her in. I should have done that." Little bit too late though. You want to hit a disabled person? Have fun with 30 plus years in jail. This happened in January, but the district attorney called me 2 days ago with the update. I am a wheelchair user because of a fainting disorder, severe POTS for those wondering. Now, POTS stands for postural tachycardia syndrome, when your heart rate increases very quickly after getting up from sitting or lying down, often making you feel dizzy or lightheaded. Okay, I didn't know that. There's currently actually no cure as well. Well, firstly, OP, I'm very sorry that you suffer from that. Anyway, let's get back into the story. I came home from work to see a car parked right under a no parking fire lane and on the sidewalk. It blocked the way into my apartment and I had to leave the wheelchair in my car. I started taking photos of the car because this had been an issue with the owner for months. My landlord had told me to get photos of it and email them to him every time she did it after I mentioned it in passing. While taking a photo, the owner came out of her apartment to scream at me. I stayed calm and I tried to walk into my apartment. She got in my face to continue screaming and by reflex, I just shoved her back. She then grabbed me by the throat and began to punch me. After a minute, my neighbours and roommate, who were having a smoke, came running and got her off of me. Police were called. Paramedics showed up because my neck was bleeding, she had acrylic nails, and I ended up going to the ER because I had a syncope episode while the paramedics were there. Now again, a syncope is another word for fainting or passing out. I wasn't sure about that, but there we go. Someone is considered to have syncope if they become unconscious and go limp, then soon recover. I decided to press charges, thinking I'd just get an aggravated assault or something. I made sure that they got her while she was home because I knew she had a gun on the wall despite being a convicted felon. When the police went to arrest her, they found that the car was stolen without insurance, she didn't have a license, there were used needles all over the apartment with her 8-year-old child, and the gun was also marked stolen. The child is in foster care and she is now in jail without bond. The DA said that her child recorded it. She apparently told her to, and it was already ruled as an assault because of the overwhelming proof, plus the 7 counts of assault she's gotten in the past 5 years already. Oh my goodness. Had I gotten her nailed with it outside her home, she would have only gotten probation, since she was a parent. But now she's lost her kid, her home, her car, and she's going to be in jail for about 30 years or more, depending on what the state charges her with for the drugs. Wow. I mean, wow. Just coming out of your house and grabbing someone by the throat and punching them in the face. What sort of person does that? It's just insane. I'm not entirely sure, to be honest, if this revenge is nuclear. I think it's more just like the justice that this woman deserved. Like, yeah, 30 years is a lot, but that's the way she's lived her life. She's done so many illegal things that she deserves 30 years. Like, I think nuclear would be if you had grabbed her by the throat and then just killed her. That probably would be more nuclear. But yeah, being realistic, I think that this is completely legitimate, and, you know, the law has said she deserves to go to jail for 30 years or more. That's not nuclear, that's just justice. I'm not sure what the damage was to you in the end. You didn't actually say how badly you were damaged. I mean, you went to the ER, but were you there for a while or not? I'm not sure. I mean, your neck was bleeding, that's never good. But it sounds to me as if you did society a favor by taking this hit. Yeah, it wasn't a good thing for you. And whether or not you stayed in the ER for a long time or not, it's terrible. However, getting this woman off the streets, out of society and into jail for that length of time is a great thing. You had to sacrifice your neck, but it was worth it. Wow. What a terrible, terrible woman. Let's move on to the second story. Now moving on to our next revenge story. I got poisoned by my old job. I called in my dad, outed them for illegal practices, caused my two brothers that worked with me to quit with me, and plunged their store down their ranking lists. Now I warn everyone not to buy anything from there. This is going to be a long one, so settle down, friends, as I tell you the horrors of this danged store. So, I, a 21-year-old man, used to work at a particular chain of southern grocery stores that sounds like the word Pringles. I worked at their stores from age 18 to 21, and I only quit last year. I'm turning 22 in July. So yeah, these stores were the only places I ever worked. I don't want to get into all the nasty details, or we'd be here for years, but this corporation is so messed up and corrupt. They did everything from shuffling around sexual offenders from store to store to firing people based off of race and religion. I myself got harassed a ton by another worker and several recurring customers, and nothing was ever done about it. But that's a different story. Now, on to why I quit from the first store. At this time, I was freshly 19. I was the main cook at the Asian food station at the deli, on top of manning several other stations. I was kneeling down to get the sauces from a low fridge when I breathed in, and I felt something hit me in the back of the brain. I was thrown off for a second, but I figured I was fine. They had an outside contractor in our area doing some work, so I just assumed that I caught a whiff of a cleaner that he was working with. I picked up the wok of orange chicken I'd been making, and I brought it up to the serving station and put it up, when one of the servers, a very sweet elderly woman, asked if I was okay, looking very concerned. I still felt fine at the moment, so I said yes, but that was it, for the moment. I immediately felt the worst brain haze I'd ever felt. My feet went out from under me and my vision went completely blurry. I stumbled backwards and I was able to catch myself on the counter behind me. Later on, the server told me she asked if I was okay because I hadn't only just lost all my colour, I'd gone grey. It felt like all my balance was gone. I worked with two of my brothers at the same location and one of them came running to help me stand. I had vague memories of my brother helping me walk to the indoor cafe, but my head was literally lulling in circles. I couldn't keep it upright. I think I almost fell on one of the managers from the front of the store. My brother made me sit down at a table and got me a cup of water. That's when I realised I was crying. My heart was pounding so hard, my entire front of my uniform was moving with it. Whatever my body was reacting to was so bad, it was overwhelming it. I felt like I couldn't move. I was just sunk into the chair, crying. I tried to pick up the cup, and my brother had to come back to help me take a drink. At this point, I was panicking. A fact about the kitchen that I, as the head chef, was painfully aware of: we had a gas-run pizza oven, a really old gas-run oven. A gas-run oven that you had to kick to get all four burners to get on. I'll tell you now though, that wasn't a gas leak, but that's where my brain immediately went to, especially since they refused to do maintenance on that oven, or the gas-run open flame woks, one machine away from said oven. This whole time I felt like I wanted to throw up, but at the same time I couldn't. The supervisor told my brother he had to stop checking on me and that he'd get in trouble if he kept checking. The supervisor and other members of morning shift, I was a night shifter, my other night shifters know how it is, well, they were treating me like I was exaggerating. One of them came over, one of whom I particularly hated because she looked down on everyone, and started baby talking about how some people are just weaker than others. This whole time I was panicking and telling her I wasn't exaggerating, and everyone else needed to leave the deli until we figured out what it was. And it was affecting me so badly, it had been an hour and my body was still panicking. It was bad. She, though, just brushed me aside and left again. That's when I realized they weren't going to investigate what happened to me at all. And they were going to keep everyone, including my two brothers, working in the same area I just got affected in. That's when our absolute hero shows up. The nearby McDonald's manager. A sick dude around the same age as me that regularly got food at the deli. I'd served him a few times. He'd been sitting in the cafe on his lunch break from his job when he saw me. He immediately came over and asked what was wrong, as we were on bro terms. I gave him a breakdown on what was going on and he went over to check it out. He came back and said that he didn't smell a gas leak, but I was definitely displaying concerning signs. So, without linking himself to me, he went up to the front of the store and basically demanded they do something about it. However, the front management realized it must have been me, so their solution, not to find out what did this to me, to take me from the cafe, drag me up to the management office and sit me in a swivel chair so they could keep an eye on me. That's right, they sat a dude that couldn't balance on his own in a swivel chair next to a desk corner. They proceeded to completely ignore me and not let my brothers come into the office to talk to me, and I was still panicking about the fact that the other workers could breathe in whatever I had done. I was finally able to coordinate enough to pull my phone out of my apron pocket and text my dad. I texted him a very short list of PowerPoints of what happened, and he asked a few questions about why my management was acting like they were, which all I could say was, I don't know. Now, this wasn't my proudest moment. A 19-year-old guy who'd been crying for over an hour and couldn't stop, texting his dad, I don't know what's happening, Dad, but I'm scared and I need you. You know what, bro? I've got to interject here and say respect for sending that message. That just shows that you're not too proud. I mean, people that are too proud wouldn't send that message. People that, have too much of an ego, even when they clearly need as much help as they can. I mean, who knows at this point? You might have been dying. I mean, we'll get on to more of the story in a second, but you've got to send these messages and not let your pride get in the way. So yeah, you shouldn't say that you're not proud. You should actually say that you're proud of not being too proud to send a message like that, if that makes sense. Anyway, let's get back into it. My dad told me he was on his way and to clock out. I told the managers my dad was coming and I needed to clock out. At this point, they were acting annoyed with me, especially the store owner. I could talk for days about how terrible the store managers were, so they were glad I was leaving. They offered to help me walk to the time clock. I should have taken their offer, but I was so angry and disappointed I refused, and I just held onto the front desk and shelving as I got to the clock out room. I clocked out and I stumbled my way back to the area I worked at to get my stuff. I had to bring my own supplies to work because they never gave us new equipment, so I had a whole backpack I needed to grab. My brothers immediately tried to run over to me when they saw me, but the manager blocked them and told them to keep working. How toxic is that? Before I could get my backpack, my manager, a woman that I'd been working under since I was 18 and frankly scared me, blocked me from going into the back room to get my bag and started demanding answers from me. Once again, this is not a proud moment. I have a medical condition that made me stop growing at 14, so I'm pretty easily intimidated. She was taller and stronger than me, and I still felt completely vulnerable. All of my senses were still shot, and my body was still in panic mode. I tried to answer her questions, but I was just mumbling and stumbling over my own words. That's when I saw him. My dad. My dad is a 5'6" man who worked as a jack-of-all-tradesman for most of my childhood. I'm talking plumber, electrician, groundskeeper, roofer, builder. At this time, he was working as a contractor, so he quite literally was building and modifying higher class houses in the mountains. He came storming in his contracting gear with a bandana wrapped around his head. That is when I knew I was going to be okay. My brothers talked about it later, but if anyone knew anything about my dad, if he had that bandana on, he was going after someone, and they were royally screwed. He walked up and immediately crossed his arms, demanding to know what happened to his kid. Once again, not a proud moment, but I moved to hide behind him. My manager was caught off guard for a moment, but recovered and started telling my dad that I'd just overreacted to a cleaner the contractor was using. At that time, I'd figured it must have been something that the contractor was using, but I didn't know for sure, so the fact they knew what had done this to me and didn't feel the need to tell me made me mad, but it annoyed my dad so much. He demanded to talk to the contractor. If you've ever heard a 49-year-old man get mad, you can imagine the tension in his voice. He didn't yell, he never yells, but when he gets serious, the tension in his voice is genuinely terrifying. The contractor they hired came over. That's when my dad's expertise clicked in. My dad, the contractor. In other words, the guy that knew all the local laws around contracted labour. He asked all the right questions. He demanded to see what the contractor had been spraying around the kitchen that day. When they handed him the can, he tore the contractor a new one. So the kitchen I work in is blocked from the rest of the deli area by a counter. A counter has about an inch of space under it for cleaning purposes. So when I leaned down, this spray had shot under the counter and directly into my face. And what was that spray? An industrial grade degreaser. It was so strong it was meant to be used in empty factories by someone in a full respirator mask. It wasn't supposed to be sprayed around people, and especially not right in someone's face. My dad immediately pointed this out and demanded to see the contractor's safety sheet on the chemical, something that all contractors in our area are required to carry on every chemical they use to show they know how to safely use it. The contractor said he had it in his van. He did not. The man was using one of the strongest factory-grade degreasers on the market, and he didn't know how to use it. He was wearing a mask while using it, sure, but not a respirator. It was just a plain white dust cover. My dad lost his mind and sent me past my manager to get my bag while he tore them apart. Oh, and the illegal part? Well, the company wasn't supposed to hire outside contractors for this exact reason, but my manager did so that the work wouldn't be filed, so it would seem like our store didn't take any company resources for repair jobs. Anyway, my dad took me home and my siblings came back too. My dad went onto his PC and looked at the full information page on the degreaser. I was in the second stage of serious poisoning. It wouldn't kill me, thankfully, but it wasn't fun. At this point, I had a little bit of my balance back, but I was still panicking and confused. I was able to draft up a text, ripping them a new one, and quitting. I had a pounding headache, and I ended up throwing up 3 times before I fell asleep that night. I woke up the next day unemployed, but a lot happier. I had a headache for several days. I ended up working for the company again for around a year in the future, but that's a different story. Now, every time I get the chance, I out all the garbage I can on this dumpster fire of a trash company. And let me tell you just a few bullet points of dirt I have on them, just for a little more revenge. They wanted me to serve frozen soup that expired in 2018 in 2021. They marked rotisserie chicken that wasn't organic as organic and sold it at a marked up price. They wanted us to cook chicken that went green. They reused expired meat from the meat counter in the ready serve food. They called people slurs outright. Okay, as if all the disgusting food stuff wasn't bad enough. They're just calling people slurs. Great. They used outside contractors with no safety standards. The managers shuffle around offenders from store to store and hire offenders that the employees ask them to ban from the store. They purposely marked up prices during times of need, hurricanes, droughts, etc. They have entire teams whose only job is to take down posts about them online because they're that terrible. They called the police on a homeless man trying to stay in the warm during a below freezing day. He wasn't bothering a soul. They didn't update the equipment, leading to several injuries. 2 of my co-workers lost large parts of their fingers. They delayed training until the last moments, leading to my training being 167 days overdue when I did it. They didn't fire an employee that slashed 2 other employees' tires and was known as a stalker. She followed someone all the way to their house. And finally, they had a food safety grade A sign up from 2019, but their current grade was barely above a C, technically a B. And so many freaking more. But this is part of my revenge. If you're in the South and see one of these dang stores, just don't go. Go into Publix. They're better. They treat their employees better. And honestly, I've never met an ex-employee from Pringles that doesn't want the entire corporation to fail and be gone. Anyways, that's the story of what happened and my never-ending revenge. I will never stop outing them for the trash corporation they are, and neither will my family. I sincerely hope I live to see that company gone. Revenge forever. Sincerely, a man that hates that corporation with his entire being. Wow, there we go. Great story. Yeah, it was a long one, but I love the long ones. A lot of context in there. The story was great. And I think the first thing I need to do, and I don't live in America, so I've actually never heard of this store, but just looking through the comments, and I'm allowed to say this because I'm not the one that's accusing this store of doing anything in particular or, having these sort of practices where they let their staff just call people slurs or whatever to one another or employ offenders, etc. But it looks to me like the name of the store is called Ingles. Now, I've not heard of it. Those of you in America, let me know if I'm right or not. But yeah, apparently it's a pretty small chain, only a little over 200 locations. But I can say this: avoid it. I'm not in danger of anyone saying to me that I've made some defamatory remarks or anything that's too incriminating. But just from what I'm seeing here, avoid this store like the plague. Let me make sure it's called Ingles. Yeah, I'm not going to be sued for that. But there we go. That is the name of the store, apparently. Now, one thing that I have to say is, why, OP, did you not go to hospital throughout all of this? Like, it doesn't matter what your manager or your, the other staff are saying to you. You could have been dying. I mean, I don't know what was... You must have had no idea what was going on. Surely someone should have said, like, go to hospital. Like, the fact that the staff were stopping your brothers from seeing you. If I'm your brothers, I don't care. I'm getting in there. I'm saying, no, we're going to hospital right now. That's the only thing I don't really understand about this story. But overall, yeah, great stuff. And you're right. If telling your story online, even me like narrating it now, giving my thoughts on it, and you guys all listening and watching to this helps people not go to Ingles anymore, I think it's worth it. Hopefully I can't get sued for this, but I don't mind saying what I've just said based on what I've just read. Okay, now for our third revenge story. Revenge on my former neighbor who vandalized my vehicle. This happened about 15 years ago. My wife and I purchased a home deep in the country in an effort to simplify our lives. We quickly met our neighbors and everything seemed good. A year or so after we moved into the home, my wife got pregnant with our first child. I traveled periodically for work at the time and I was out of town. My wife was wanting to take a relaxing soak in the tub as her feet had swollen due to the pregnancy. As she was trying to relax, the neighbor's dog was barking incessantly. The dog was a large breed and had a big bark. This went on and on for 30 minutes or so. My wife had a pregnancy psycho moment and got out of the tub, put on her bathrobe, and screamed out the door at the neighbor to shut their barking dog up. Well, here is where the story gets pretty fun. The neighbor went full-on redneck on us. They renamed their Wi-Fi SSID to, quote, I love barking dogs. We would find random things vandalized on our property. One day I came home from work to see my wife picking stuff up from the driveway. Well, it turns out that this redneck had thrown some poorly made nail devices in our driveway in an attempt to puncture my truck's tires. The next event was truly diabolical. I left for work the next morning, and by the time I got to the interstate, my brakes felt sort of squishy. I pulled into a truck stop to inspect the truck. The petcock valve on my front right brake caliper had been loosened, and my brake fluid had mostly drained out. This guy tried to kill me. I went postal, but with insidious methods. I work in the IT field, so technology is my thing. I had an old laptop that I installed an OS on that is used for security penetration testing, and I cracked their Wi-Fi. I printed interesting things on their printer, including a convincing email from another woman to the husband. I printed prawn photos. I'd love to have been a fly on the wall when the cow found that. I discovered that I could go online and sign up for a prison romance pen pal. I signed his wife up and wrote a letter that was supposedly from her. I gave their address and I told the inmate enough about their life, how long they'd been married, what the hubby did for a living, how many kids, dogs, etc. they had, stuff like that, to make it convincing. I expect that her husband had a few words for her after that. I've never told this story before, and I hope it brings someone else even a little bit of joy. That was a funny one. Now, importantly, guys, some of you might be wondering, like me, okay, that's great and all, but did anything actually happen? As in, what were the repercussions? Because this guy has tried to kill you and you haven't gone to the police. So somebody actually asked OP in the comments, okay, but did this actually achieve anything? And OP said, we moved shortly after. I heard they got divorced a couple of years later. So there we go. Sounds like this did have the desired effect. But yeah, crazy, crazy neighbors. This is my fear. I'm actually trying to get a place at the moment, right? And I'm slightly concerned because how do you ever know what your neighbors are going to be like? If you've got people like this next to you, this makes such a difference compared to having, just normal neighbors. You can have the nicest house in the world, be in the nicest place in the world. But if your neighbors are going to be like this and try and kill you, none of that really matters. So maybe I'm thinking of the worst here, but yeah, I wouldn't want to have neighbors like this, that's for sure. However, I suppose if I do, then I'll have some great stories to tell.